Yeah, but when you sit over there, they get to see your midget. Over here, it's your hair. At least you can comb your hair. Over there, you just suck on it.
All right.
That's why I moved. All you got was a reflection off the back of my head.
I think we need to move that up.
Can't quite see the screen there.
That's right.
It's the better
We probably should.
You're good. You're live.
All right.
We're streaming right now.
You guys are streaming.
All right, let's call the workshop to order. Wednesday, April 18th, 2018. Ready to adopt the agenda? Any updates or modifications on the agenda? On the agenda, shall we?
Can we add that one thing about the car wash?
We do not.
Since it's CDD talked about it last time, we might as well just put
We
that
can,
away.
you want to talk about that briefly?
Just to say what they said.
Okay, we'll do that.
We put that at the end
Okay.
under administrative items. Or?
And can we move, with the board's consent, move the item under board workshop recording, streaming, and security, which is about halfway through our agenda. Can we move that to talk about that first? To make sure we're in agreement?
Second.
Okay, great. Consensus on that? Okay, let's move in. So that's the first item on the agenda. What we had on there was a discussion about our board workshop recording. Last year, the board adopted a policy that we would record workshops and then post them 1 to 2 days later, within 48 hours. Board meetings are live streamed and have been for a while. So there was some suggestion that maybe we start live streaming these. Just want to make sure that that is our thinking. Is that okay with the board? Or would
okay
you
with me.
rather have it deferred?
I don't see any hesitation.
Let me explain why we did it last year. Because everything was go straight to YouTube. And we talked with Patrick last year, and it said if we can get a service that would allow us to stream behind our website. In other words, you had to sign in order to see it.
Resident only.
That'd be fine. But I believe you told me that the size of it was limited, and we didn't have enough space to upload the workshop without an increased cost. Is that correct?
The site that we used was called Vimeo, and we still have that because it houses all of our videos from minimum 7 or 8 years prior, all the way up until when we started going live with YouTube. So those videos are still there. As far as YouTube's concerned, there's no other way. It's a free service and we utilize that. We have the equipment, we pay for that. So there's no monthly cost that we're incurring. It was just an option to stay technologically savvy and give residents who aren't able to come to the meetings that opportunity to see it live, and instead of waiting for that video to be posted. As far as privacy goes, it's public. So there aren't too many options out there besides going back to a more secure site that will house our live streaming that you can only view as a resident function. With our current website, that's not the capability of it.
Would that be, and that's part of the security item, would that be something that as we move to a revised website, we talked about that, we'll do another update on that today, is that
It will be behind a
secure,
password-protected
resident-only, password-protected website?
Correct.
Can I just add an update to that too, though? Just so everybody understands, you cannot watch the live streaming from our webpage unless you're logged in. So if you're not logged into the webpage, you don't have access to the live streaming. Is that correct?
From our webpage.
Yeah, from our
I will
webpage.
be happy to pull it up right here and show you how.
But one could do it,
From our
not
webpage?
from the webpage.
Right.
But one can still do it.
From YouTube.
But you
I'm not talking about from YouTube. I'm talking about from our webpage.
But you allow the link to YouTube from our webpage. So you just go ahead, go to the webpage that we have, click where it says YouTube on that video format, that square that's in there playing. Click that, it takes you right to our page on YouTube,
Right.
if that makes sense.
So-
which does not require any login.
Right,
The
so
reason
that was-
is it's easier for me just to click that and watch it live. I
Yeah.
do it all the time.
Right, so that was the second part to what I was going to say, that you have to be logged in to see it from our page. But if you know how to go to YouTube, you can Google or search for CROA, and you can find our page, and you can find all of our past meetings, and you could watch it live at the point in time that it's running. So I think what we need to do is, as part of the scope of the new website, make sure that they have that capability to where we can hide it, code it, whatever, put it behind the
Just for
login screen.
resident only.
Well, to the point of resident only, let me just ask a hypothetical. If someone were to walk into the room right now who lives in Celebration and wants to see this meeting but isn't a residential owner, they're renting, would we deny them admission to this meeting?
No.
They wouldn't have the right to speak if they're not a resident, but they'd have the right to view, right, to watch.
They have a right to view. They have a-
You've actually, in the time that I've been here, and I believe before that, have never stopped renters from speaking
I
either,
agree.
even
I'm
though they
making the
don't necessarily have the right.
Right. So my point is, in a digital world, what's the difference? When we say you have to be behind our firewall, we're really limiting to a class that we would not limit to in the real world, in real life.
Correct.
My personal view is there's nothing that we should be saying in these meetings that we're not willing to say publicly. And if we have to say it privately, go to executive session if we're talking about litigation or personnel matters. But other than that, I would rather see us in a position where we're actually talking, openly and not worried about so much of, is it behind a firewall or not? Because frankly, it is easy to hack. Kevin's correct.
And
So-
also, I think, Patrick, you said that it's easier for you and actually saves us money if you live stream these because it creates work for you if we don't.
Right, there's a reduction of steps.
So
Making
to
sure the
this,
video goes up.
to this point, for now, with our current technology, are we okay live streaming?
I am.
I'm okay live streaming behind the firewall.
And as we've discussed, we have a firewall, but it's not real. One can get to the same feed elsewhere.
You would just have to
That's
go
what
through
I'd like to close the
YouTube to
loop
see
on.
it.
But so that's a future discussion then, with the future website. Do we want to secure it and make it resident only or not? Which we don't have to resolve today.
Yes.
So for the
But
time being.
for the time being,
do
with
the
our
workshop
technology as it is,
the way that
for the next few
works.
months, are we okay with that?
Well, can I just add one more thing? From what we understand from the developer of the current website, we don't have the capabilities to
Right.
do what Jack's asking us to do now.
Right.
We can certainly ask for it in our new website.
Right. So we should ask for it, have that as an option, because a future board may change the direction one way or the other, whatever we decide.
Right.
So we want to have that capability, and we decide whether to exercise that as a conscious decision. So we're okay with that for now?
Well,
Go ahead.
I'm willing to kick the can down the road in the face of comedy, and I don't mean comedy with a D, but with a T.
T.
But I will say, we are gonna have a discussion at some point about this, because I don't think we have an agreement on this board about what the public view should be here.
Right.
And I want Jack's voice to be heard about this, but I respectfully disagree.
Right.
I just don't feel the need for the entire United States to be looking at us and commenting on us, because you can make all kinds of comments with YouTube.
You
So
wanna address that?
let's keep, go ahead.
I can just turn commenting off.
Yeah.
If, as one answer to that. But, I'll leave that up to you as far as the whole world.
So I think we can discuss that later. I think there's also the opportunity for someone who's not a homeowner, who's considering moving to Celebration. Does he or she want to look at what we're doing and how we do business?
Just may turn it off.
So,
Well, right now, I would say, I would prefer streaming
so that's where we
right
are.
now,
That's
because
where
I
we
think
are.
the residents, I think we owe it to the residents right now,
Right.
and then later on, we can deal with
And we'll
the
decide,
other issue.
as we refine what goes into the website.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're closure on that. We need a vote for today?
We can do it.
Because
I vote
it's-
yes.
I just want to remind the board, my son came across one of our videos one time, my 11-year-old, and he calls me and says, "Daddy, you're on TV. You have a really boring job." So, well, thank you for your comments. So it's riveting TV for the 11-year-olds at home.
So closing this, everyone okay?
Do you want a motion? Do you want a motion? Do you want
Let's
to?
go for a motion.
I move that we stream all workshops and board meetings.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thanks. Thank you, Patrick. So what I'm proposing for the agenda is some quick updates, things that we've talked about before. 30 minutes for 5 separate updates total. So the first one was interlocal agreement. We had some discussion last time about an alternative plan, so any update on that?
I can give a quick update. I reached out to the county to set up a date, and they gave us a few dates. And the one that is going to work for everybody looks like May 14th will be where we'll go down to the county service building, and it'll be Kevin Jackson and Vaughn, myself, meeting with Beth Ann Knight, Deputy County Manager,
Good.
and Dave Tomac.
And so that's going the direction that was proposed by the subcommittee.
That's what
week ago.
we'll propose
Yeah,
to
well,
them.
wait, that's the directions you're talking about as far as switching the funding from one to another? Did the board vote on that, and did we take this to the community?
I know my intention was to address increase in funding.
I think
Just
increasing
that,
funding is
but
fine, but I think our original intention for this board, or this committee, was to go through the interlocal agreement and come up with some kind of
the usage-
alternative position to offer them, and I mean, something that's amenable to us. And I don't think we've done that.
I think what we tried to do at that last workshop was to present an alternative and then present the alternative to the county and see what they say. Then we can come back to the residents with that information as well. Then we can make a decision.
And
But
I-
we need to speak with them
I
to,
think we gave direction to Steve to contact the county in regard to that. It's just, that's a yes or no question.
no, I thought it was just set up a date.
It was,
No.
we didn't want to ask them over the phone. We
did
wanted
not.
to meet with them in person to
The
talk to
direction
them
we
about
gave Steve was to not talk about it on the phone and to
Right.
have an in-person meeting,
Right.
which involved the board. But I think there were two parts on this. One is explore that as an option, and we don't know what the redirection of the funding, but at the same time, and this is something that now that we have the, if you will, the luxury or the non-luxury of 3 weeks, I would ask the committee to look at what might be proposed and what might be relevant should they say no. In other words, what we thought, and this is, I think, what your concern was a week ago, Jack, the original charge was, what does that interlocal agreement look like for a building with 4 walls?
Right.
Whether it's new or existing. So I would propose that you start thinking about or start working on what that might be.
I'd also like to consider one other thing. What about using the county money and then paying it back?
to eliminate the usage, the public usage.
Yeah.
So a loan from the county.
Yeah,
So that's an idea for the committee to take a look at.
I mean,
And I
if
think
it's such a concern that we have in the community for this,
So I think that once we get some guidance from the county, some reactions to this might fly, or let's talk about it more, or this definitely won't fly, then I think we're at the point of taking it more largely to the community with some town hall meeting, because I think we're kind of absent that right now.
In conversation on this, do we, the 6 of us that are here right now, do we feel that 2.5 will be enough to construct that building and furnish that building without further investment from the residents?
no.
No,
Okay.
absolutely.
So right off the bat,
And
it
it's-
is not and Brian, you're gonna be the best guy to ask with this.
Well, no, I
It's-
think we had all agreed that 2.5 million was not going to be enough for the building. Coming out of the last meeting, though, the 2.5 million towards the fields gave us a lot more flexibility. That's where I thought we really ended up with wanting to have the conversation with the county. Because, yes, we can ask for more. They may say yes, they may say no, but, you know, because the conversation at the last meeting about public usage was that we really got public usage already in place when you talk about certain fields here already. So if it's not a draconian change from where we're at today and we can manage it on the fields, it seemed like a very manageable issue, but we need the conversation.
My further concern is if we do, same thing, tying off that, just to finish that thought, is the 2.5, are we prepared to invest? Do we have the funding to invest what's needed to bring that building to a complete stance? And that's where we're saying probably about 4 mil is what we're tossing around as a final number. So is there another 1.5 sitting around
Well-
to jump into that? And I don't think so. So that's
But-
where that funding conversation comes.
I know
But it's a matter of
from
timing.
my conversations with Jack, and he can speak for himself in a second here, you can do things on a building, and it depends what type of building you build, but you can build certain types of buildings where you spend $2.53 million and leave the additional piece to be perfected at a point in the future. And, if we build the building ourselves, we also buy ourselves a year. There will be more money coming in next year. You have the grand question of do you have a bad hurricane season or not have a bad hurricane season and stuff like that. So we have certain flexibilities here based upon timing. If we got to 2.5 million and can use it on the ball fields today, that would be, in my opinion, a win because it buys us maximum flexibility.
Can I mention one other thing? It's actually, you're neglecting the $250,000 for the engineering study as well. So it's actually $2.75 million.
And possible additional dollars for a traffic study.
Yeah.
I just want to remind all of us that what we came out of the last workshop saying, and I don't know if Rachel's got the notes or not, we said what we wanted to do was to engage the county and start the conversation. We're not making any decisions here. We're just saying to the county, because we've given no response to their original offer, that we would like to look at this proposal and think about this as a next step. I think what's making it feel weird is that the county has pushed us back a full month to have that conversation.
So, and I'm glad you brought that up, because what I heard out of last week's workshop is, number one, we want to communicate, we are interested in funding.
Yes.
Now we're talking about the conditions under which that funding would come. And so the first strike on that would be, go ahead.
Well, no, go ahead, and I'll go right after
Okay,
you.
so then the first thing is, let's look at that alternative way of thinking, rather than four walls, rather than a building. Let's look at fields, which gives us flexibility in terms of dates. The second thing is to look at the dollar amount. So start to negotiate that. That can all be part of the conversation in 3 or 4 weeks. And then the other thing that we haven't talked about now, but you inferred, is the date. So when we look at this interlocal agreement, there was a start date, there was so many days. If it went to the fields, well, then that changes the whole date thing, but.
Right. And I think, I'd like to clarify off of what Jackson said there, because if we go to a May 14th meeting and they say, no, it can't be used for fields, it can only be used for a building, we can't start down a process of a long-term type thing if we want taking the 2.75 million or whatever it's going to be a feasible option, because time is flying, you know.
Well, yeah, but the 2.5 million doesn't become available until October at the earliest.
Right.
I
So your
understand.
480 days can't start before then.
I understand, but
But
if
even
you're in the
that-
middle of May and then it's June and July, I just worry that drift
I-
will get real here, and we haven't.
I understand, but I think we can couch that in the agreement that it doesn't start till the day we sign it.
Right.
Well, and deadlines usually push your priorities too. So if you're.
But it's a matter of engaging the conversation, which I think is important. And then we start to engage the community. Because I think the only formal input we've had was on the February survey, where we had some unsolicited comments about county money, and it was like 15 comments.
I just remind the board that we had tabled the resolution for a
Yes.
town meeting. So it's still out there.
Right.
I don't think we're walking back any part of that. I think that there's a middle road between being overly eager and being negligently slow. I wish the county would have given us a date that we could have worked with sooner than May 14th.
Right.
Nonetheless, the fact that we're continuing to talk about these things, I'm hearing things like the loan versus gift I've never heard before. Those are all ideas that we can come back to this board, and I would suggest that we set up a workshop for as soon after the 14th as possible, with the sole topic of talking about what we learned there and what we think the next steps would be. I would hope that would get us moving in the right direction.
I'd also be very interested in hearing what your counter proposal will be. To be
Well, we don't
presented
know,
on
we
May
haven't heard
14th.
their proposal yet, so we don't
You
know.
got their proposal right here.
No, not that one, no.
Well, I'm just saying, let's go in there prepared.
I'm interested in hearing the counter proposal, what we have to say myself. Is that what you're talking about?
No, I think I don't think we're fully prepared then. I think we're just going in there to hear one thing, you could hear that in 3 minutes.
I don't think we will. I don't think they're going to give us a yes or no in 3 minutes. I think they're going to say we need to take it back to the commissioners, we need to study it, we need to think about it, most likely. But I don't want, for me, and I'm speaking only for myself, not for the task force, I don't want this narrative to be solely on the basis of the agreement that they suggested to us. I think that's the beauty of the suggestion and the solution that Vaughn presented, is that it is an elegant solution that gets the discussion going, but doesn't put it in that context. I think we lose from a negotiating position when we negotiate to their document.
And there hasn't been negotiation. As
Hasn't
we
been.
learned,
No.
there's
No.
been zero
No.
negotiation with this
So-
situation.
I'd like to remind the board too that they didn't come to Celebration and say, hey, we want to build a community center in Celebration. That was stemmed from a conversation about possible future facilities within the community.
Ties into their master plan,
But we-
Osceola County's
yeah,
master plan.
right.
It all goes hand
Ties
in
into
hand.
ours.
But we never said, what about fields? You know, we never countered with, I mean, I think that the whole interlocal agreement that they sent us was driven based on us saying, here's what some of the thoughts are within the community. They said, well, maybe we can help. So I don't think that the county is sour or negative to what you're talking about. They just never heard it yet. So we got to have the conversation with them. We got to sit down in front of them.
Well, can you refresh for me what the advantage is that we would have by letting it have usage of the field rather than, and I assume that would preclude them using any of the community centers, is that right?
Not
I can
preclude them,
answer
but there would be no requirement that we would have to establish space within the building and public use unless we
Well,
wanted
the
to.
only space you're providing them is the extension office.
We don't know that.
That's what's in
That's
that
what's in that
interlocal
particular
agreement.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the best way to look at this is if it's yours and you own it completely outright, you could decide at any point in time you're shutting it down and you have to have a card to get in. You have to have CROA ID to get into it. If it's county, you cannot do that at any point in time on the life of the agreement.
So what does that do to us as far as the field's in?
The fields is no different than what we currently do.
Yeah, your
Is that
fields
correct?
are going to be booked by your league play, your local league play for practices mostly, and then for games. And those leagues already have non-residents that are participating in them. They're practicing in our facilities and they're playing games here.
Which meets that.
It meets your public purpose.
Since your meeting is not happening until May 14th, should we re-challenge the wisdom of waiting to at least give them an inclination of what we're talking about, since we're already recording and posting these meetings anyway, so they could find out if they went there? I mean, otherwise, you're just letting another 3.5 weeks pass.
I'd rather be
I
face
spoke
to
with
face.
Beth Ann personally, and she didn't push me one way or the other for it. She said, let's get together, let's talk about it.
And this was as soon as that she offered.
Well, she offered 3 dates, if you remember. It was May 4th, May
May 4th,
11th, and May
then they took it
14th.
away.
And we put down the 4th, and then something happened where they
And they took
couldn't,
it
and then
away.
we couldn't do the 11th. So we took the latter of the 3.
So the options they gave us were May 11th to May 14th. So we went off by 3 days.
Right.
Is there any way to just say, hey, if an opening comes in, please
Yes, I would
feel
do
free
that.
to
I would
reach
do
out?
that, even if you don't have all three.
Just to get that initial conversation,
Sure.
keeping the May 14th
I
date
would push for an
on
earlier
their
date.
calendar.
Okay.
How much
So we
time
thought-
did they give you?
You mean for the actual meeting? I think we had scheduled an hour.
Even push it back to a half hour, if that gives you more opportunity to go
Right.
earlier.
If that makes a difference.
If it makes a difference for earlier. All right, can we move to next item?
Yes.
Island Village, brief update.
Do you want to?
I'll start. Bennett, who made the town hall presentation in this room, reached out, and he reached out and just wanted to talk and establish a relationship, which I thought was nice. And I thought it was important that I engage at least one other board member, and since Kevin and I are the leads or the co-leads on that particular goal area, I wanted you involved, and then asked for any others, and then Jackson came, and then Bennett was going to bring someone else who had a last-minute conflict. The four of us then talked. We met in Heritage Hall. Wanted to make sure management was not involved in that, just for making this a board conversation. And we had a conversation about hoping that they would do it right, hoping that they would do it well, that they would take lessons from prior development, most recently Spring Lake. And we suggested that the next step would be meeting with the entire board, include Jeffrey Moen in that, and/or have Jeffrey separate with Bennett, just so that Bennett is hearing from the town architect, and then engage the community. So they talked about having not a visitor center, what would you call
Sales
it?
center.
A sales
Pre-sales
center,
A sales
similar to
center,
Windsor.
pre-sale center, and one of the locations they're looking at is where Windsor has been, right across from the Bohemian, which is now empty space. And then the other idea that they brought up was the movie theater. So that's the essence of it. Really, the next step is for him to come and meet with this board in a workshop setting
What about the movie theater?
as a potential,
This movie theater?
The AMC.
this movie theater,
Oh,
as a potential space for pre-sales or,
Essentially, they want a space that's currently vacant downtown is where they were.
where they can have
going
mock-ups
with
up
that
there,
conversation.
oh, I see.
or drawings or whatever that a sales center would offer. So, I don't know if you want to say any
I thought it
more.
was a productive conversation. I think we tried to impress upon Bennett that if Matamy's plan is to build the same kind of subdivision communities that they have built in other parts of the country, that would not be acceptable. That we had an expectation for what construction and design aesthetics in Celebration were, and that we would be pretty rigorous in our approach to ensuring that happens. I would say David was very diplomatic, Kevin was very earnest, and I was pretty much a flamethrower. Which I thought actually
You're
was really well.
It's a nice team.
You were very
Good guy, bad guy, good guy.
Yeah, so, sometimes you got to say it. I wanted them to be clear that we're excited that they're coming. There's a lot of things happening, but we're not here to be run over.
So since TCC is the one doing the approving and the one with all the power, how did you
Well,
say,
it's-
I mean,
yeah,
just,
yeah, yeah, it
how
comes
are we
back
going to enforce what you said?
Yeah, we're going to use soft power, Brian. We're going to put it in front of this community every chance we get. We're going to talk about it. We're going to keep it on the front burner. We don't have hard power. We clearly don't. Nor does CCD on a lot of stuff. But I think that's the bigger question, the bigger problem that we're facing in this community is that we are all hamstrung about everything. We went to CCD last night, and I don't know how many times did they talk about CROA during CCD. It was unbelievable. We're all in this position where we say, well, it's not really, I can't do that, and I can't do that, and I can't do that. I think with a new developer like Matamy, it's important to establish at the beginning that we represent the residents of this community, and that we're going to be vocal, even when we don't have statutory authority to force them to do something, we can at least bring it to their attention. That's my view. Now, the board may say, no, that's not going to happen, but that's my view.
Okay.
Look, I think it would be beneficial, staff had to deal with the recent Spring Lake development. We know the problems we've faced there. I'd like to have a bullet listing of those problems we face. I know we've had problems, I know CDD's had problems, they like to interface, but they at least are the ones who are going to grant the bond money, so they can do something.
Right.
But I think TCC was probably oblivious to all these things that have gone on in the past.
That's true.
I would like to have these bullet points and say, look, we don't want to have AMUs, we don't have this stuff here. This is the requirements as far as irrigation levels and stuff like that. So at least have them planning in this phase, so they pass the bill on to the homeowners and not to us.
Right. The bullet points and the rationale. You don't want Muse because. Is that
Well,
something?
But I'm also saying we had the wrong landscaping in there,
Right.
and we had the wrong width of house.
The houses are so close that
We
you don't
also had the
like.
wrong size irrigation heads, so we had to replace all the heads.
So one of the things we did suggest to them is do focus groups with Spring Lake residents to find out how Spring Lake residents feel about living in Spring Lake.
I think the bullet points would be a great idea, because that way you don't forget things when you're discussing
Yeah.
Right.
the development with
And the
them.
suggestion was that he would come to a workshop, we would find, after we get our dates together, I believe today, we're gonna tie
Right.
that up. We'll offer dates to him that might work, and then get him on the agenda so we can go ahead and
Right.
maybe discuss those
So
bullet
we
points.
start that
or other-
dialogue and
Other
then,
concerns.
yeah.
The last thing that I thought was notable that we talked about was the access into Island Village from the south,
Gonna bring
The
that
back,
up.
the back
the
door,
back door, which he called a side door,
side door.
and showed us some temporary construction roads so that they could build the bridge that they need to build from both ends of the bridge. But then we talked about the contiguous nature of the fourth phase of Island Village and where that matches up to the highway. And it looks like that's what the State Highway Authority is looking at for an exit off of that road, which would come right up through Island Village and into Celebration. He seemed, I thought, surprised to hear that.
This was a concern that I brought up, because if you look on the map, you'll see Phase 4 of Island Village and you'll see Reunion. They tie very close together. the state has approved the 429 to be expanded, and it actually goes right in between there, which ties into what Jackson was mentioning. My concern, as a resident, call me whatever hat I would be wearing, is that you're going to have during tourism season, or whatever the case is, an access road that's going to accommodate Davenport, the vacation rental area, that's going to shoot through Island Village, going to create traffic flow issues, things like that. Now, they do say it's temporary, but I would like to make sure that we do whatever we can to, if a road goes in, act as if that road will be permanent. Because the state will quickly turn around and take advantage and say, oh, it's possible, we can make it work. Something that I did bring up as a suggestion, and I would like to share this with the board and have conversation down the road, is if Mattamy wanted to prevent that, providing a parcel of land in that area to CROA. We are not a gated community. However, what it would do, it could be a restriction from allowing that road to happen. Of course, it's eminent domain and other things that could happen, but it may be a park that requires access with a resident card to go into. And once you go into that small park area, it might have a parking lot, whatever the case is, think of Lakeside, you can continue out to outside of Celebration on the Reunion ends, Osceola County Road, wherever it is right there, by continuing through with that card. So
Are you talking about that becoming an
Might
asset
be a-
of CROA then?
in order
Actual
to,
land, piece of land?
on the legal front, in order to prevent outside residents of Celebration from using this access road.
I wonder, since Mattamy is building this, will they not own the roads until they're turned over?
I
So
don't know,
why
it
don't you-
depends.
Why don't you assign them to the village? You can gate that community then. They own the roads.
Can you clarify though? So their initial conversation, there was no connection between Reunion and Island Village. So what you're saying then is that a construction access road that they're going to have to build will then connect the two?
Down to
That's not the side
Osceola
exit
County.
that you're talking about.
No, I want to just keep this in mind, because there's
Okay.
some conversation and they're definitely not going to put everything out on the table at first.
Okay.
So I'd like to just watch that,
Okay.
continue to watch
I
it.
think the point today is to brief us and to know that we would have a full board conversation that would involve management and involve Jeffrey. Well, I think this
That's
is
where it's going.
really just a short snippet today.
But you met with Bennett. I mean, who's the mover and the shaker?
That was a great question.
You brought it up.
Yeah, I basically said, I want to talk to your boss.
And
He said, well, I've got a boss who's got a boss who's got a boss in Canada. We're like, well, okay, does anybody in your company live in Celebration, work in Celebration, spend time in Celebration? Do you guys have boots on the ground? Not so much. So the answer is Bennett is the front guy. He is not the decision maker, in my view. And when he watches this video, he may come back and say that's not true. But that was the impression I was left with.
And when I went to the meeting that Steve alluded to, every one of them said they lived somewhere else, and I got the opinion that no one even had boots, let alone boots on the ground. I mean, they were worried about selling homes.
That's,
And that was fancy shoes, not boots.
Can I add too, when it comes to approval for architectural and aesthetic design, Mark Jones, I believe, will be working with TCC and those type of approval processes. I think Jeffrey has a lot of great insight and information, but landscape was our biggest problem in Spring Lake. So I would want to include Albert Riddle as part of those conversations
Okay.
also.
Okay?
And I think we gave him that
That
name.
name
We
as
did.
well.
We did.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
We did.
Who would have the most interest, well, not the most interest, but who would have, besides CROA, have specific interest on this road? Would it be CCDD as well? Do we need to engage them in this?
Well, in the
Initially,
county,
I'm not
because
sure.
it'll become a county
Yeah,
road
it's
once
the
it's done.
Well, no, CDD owned all of our roads and turned them over after several years. CDD will own that road too, because they'll have the easements, okay?
Was
the
it
beginning.
CDD, when they initially floated the bond for it?
Yeah, because they just recently, I mean, it's like about 10 years ago, they turned over the roads in North Village to the state area.
So in this meeting that we're talking about, the next meetings, do we need to reach out to CCDD to be engaged with us on this issue with the road? Not the rest as much as the road. That's.
I'd like to just be cautious and watch it.
Let's
Watch it.
Just don't want to wait too long and watch it too long, and then all of a sudden you see the company's made a decision and the state's made a decision.
I would hope that this meeting with Bennett would be our next workshop, a workshop in May, early May. And we'll come back to that. Next item, board meeting agenda process. Just to know that the board meeting agenda gets finalized and posted by Thursday, by tomorrow, for next Wednesday's board meeting?
I think it goes up by, well,
Tomorrow's the Thursday prior to the meeting.
yeah, the board book goes out to you guys tomorrow night.
Okay, so board book is being delivered if you want hard copy, but I think everyone weighed in for,
That depends on if the agenda is finalized, and right now it is not.
okay, so the agenda is, I saw a draft this morning.
Well, the reason why it's not finalized, so let's talk about the process.
Yeah.
The process is, it's the president's agenda. So we got to get the president's approval on the agenda. So we sent it to David today for approval, and he has some questions. So I just need to get him some response to those questions, and then it should be finalized. Is that correct?
Well,
Once we get the feedback from.
yeah, depending on how many corrections have to be made
Right.
to the entire book. That
Right.
depends on when the
Well,
book is
I
being
think
deadline.
that's an important point also. You know, we take pride in giving you a product that looks good. We don't want it to have a lot of spelling errors and
Right.
have tabs missing, those types of things. So if there's a lot of changes to it, it may take a little more time for us to get those changes adjusted and get it out to you. But if it's minimal changes, it's easy fix for us. We'll get it out to you tomorrow.
So in reading through the agenda, which I got this morning, no surprises. And what I was asking for is, since for four of you, it's the first time that you'll formally see, I mean, you've seen the prior board books, but this is really digesting it. I would say, we're spending X amount here, make sure there's good documentation. Or something, there was one about roofing for one of the areas, and I said, make sure whatever lessons learned from the prior roofing issue that we're dealing with in executive session are addressed. Just so that we, as we read the rationale for this decision for this contractor, we know that we have, or the management has folded in the lessons from a prior contractor.
And I think it's also important for the four new board members to understand that the items that you're going to see on the agenda for approval are over $5,000 operating expenses, but they were operating expenses that were approved when we developed this operating and maintenance budget back in October of last year. So they're not new items that we're adding in. They're items that the last board approved to be part of the budget. And then you'll be approving any reserve capital improvement expenditures. Those are the ones that come before you. So it's not, you probably won't see a lot of items of the big picture stuff that we've been talking about over the past month. It's more of the
Two playgrounds.
the technical,
Two
hey, we
playgrounds.
need you to give us the approval so we can go ahead and move forward with the
Two
business.
playgrounds that Todd highlighted
During the walkthrough.
in our walkthrough. And then there was something for some enclosure around some trash bins that was at ARC.
I think
on
Savannah
Monday.
Square was on that.
On Monday, that was on
Savannah
Monday,
Square.
and then Todd did the drive around when we did, what was it, Savannah Square?
Savannah Square,
So
correct.
that's on the agenda. So no real, no surprises. I don't see controversy there. I don't see controversy.
What we would like to see is, instead of at board meetings having a lot of debate about items, it should be items that between the time you get the agenda on Thursday and by the time we meet on Wednesday, some discussion and then some approval so that we can move them forward, or table them because you need more information.
Could I ask a parliamentary procedural question? Is it possible at that board meeting to make a motion for unanimous consent on items 1 through 31 or 1 through 28, whatever it might be, for approval rather than actually voting on each individual motion unless a board member wants to pull it out and talk about it?
It's fine when there's similar items, but a lot of times you're dealing with a lot of different things.
I think what we've
But is there any
seen,
procedural
Jackson, is
reason? I mean,
No, there's not.
the question
There's
is,
nothing for it.
yes, it's from a parliamentary standpoint, yes, you can do that.
Okay.
But from a reality standpoint, in the past, we've had a lot of individual questions about each individual item. So as much as we can answer those up front before Wednesday, that's a benefit to, I think, both the board and to the management team. So ask the questions, and we'll get you back your answers before Wednesday. And hopefully, we can reduce a lot of the debate at the Wednesday meeting.
I have one question about going that way, saying items 1 through 10, but don't we I think we at least, at a minimum, need to read through them and identify them so that the public, the residents hear us
Yes.
and know what monies we're voting on for, and for what purpose.
That would be my concern. When you mix playground equipment and roofing and painting and whatever. And appointments to committees. I mean, there's 5 committees. There's a brand new one with a charter called the Dog Park Committee, which we talked about a meeting or 2 ago.
All right.
So the committee members and the committee charter. So those 5 could be grouped.
Could we have these items in groupings like that?
We do our best to do that up front. We have a process of building tabs and making everything PDF. And it's a 400-plus page book, so you have as much information, I think, that you need to be able to make the decisions that you're going to make. But once we build the tabs, for us to then move everything around requires us to break all the tabs and then rebuild them all again, and it's a process. So you can see the pain on Rachel's face. But we do our best while we're building it.
So one of the things that I wrote here, so I'll jump to it, review for future board meeting packets. As you're going through this, it's for our voting and our discussion, whatever discussion we want to have next Wednesday. But as you look at the board book, this is what's public. Everything you see is the same as the public sees, with the exception of, there's a few tabs where there's
Delinquent
individual
accounts.
items, intent to lien and so forth. So those are not public. So the question I have is, what is it that we need as a board, and what do we think the public needs? Do we need 400 pages? That's going to be a question. And then in what format? So is it crystal clear what we're voting on? As a board member last year, I remember sometimes it's like, I'm not clear what the question is, and I'm not clear what management's recommendation is.
Well, we
So I
have
just want to
a,
make that crystal clear. But the point is, as you go through this, particularly the first time, what makes it easier for you?
we have,
And so after we do this once or twice, I'd like to step back, maybe it's a half hour in a workshop, where we say, hey, let's revamp what we're doing, or the materials. Not to burden management, but ideally to reduce the burden and maintain transparency.
we have a cover sheet for each action item. And it'll tell you where the money's coming from, how much money's left in that account, what you budgeted for it, and it does have a recommendation from management. If we got 3 bids, we'll tell you who we recommend you select. So all of that is on the cover page. Technically, you could get by with just reading the cover page, but we want you to have all the supporting documentation behind that tells you why we are recommending what we're recommending.
So again, all of this, and again, something that we've talked about before is, how is this working? I would propose a June workshop where we step back and look at, we're not doing Wednesday management, we're doing a lot of communication. Is this working? Should the entire board see the agenda? Oh, I mean, I saw it this morning for the first time, and I had a couple suggestions, which I want to, again, raise with you all. Should we all see? So that becomes a question of process, because we're changing things. Mm-hmm. So here's a specific question. Last night on the CDD agenda, and this has been the case for a year or two, there's an item called CROA representative. Should we have an item on our agenda that says CDD representative or CDD report?
I think last night, when I did speak on behalf of CROA at the CCDD meeting, I believe it was our feeling as a board that we wanted to engage CCDD
Right.
more often
Yes.
on more issues.
Yes.
And to get closer.
Yes.
So that we operate more closely together. And I think in order to do that, not only, like they invited us on their agenda, we should do the same here. There was a lot of information from that CDD meeting last night that I think is very important, and the residents need to know it, and have them come here and make a report for the residents that may only watch the CROA boards and workshops, and then they can actually hear what CCD.
Well, so it's like our interpretation of when we had the report from the contractor Cytex Aquatics.
Yes.
About what happens with the ponds.
That's
And that
great
they put
information.
dye-
That was
they
great
put dye
information.
in the ponds.
Yes.
And there's a reason for that. They talked about it.
I had no idea about what they did.
And they
we
called
learned a lot.
it, it was, what do you call it? It was safe. It was safe.
It was food coloring.
Well, food
That
coloring,
was
but it was-
safe.
I always wonder why it came out blue.
So,
Just
but
like
it's
I'm
it's to
asking.
keep the lighting down in the ponds, which I guess keeps algae from
Keeps
growing.
algae.
Right,
But I think it would be helpful for our residents to know.
I think so too.
Yeah, these little FAQs.
I'd like to see them on our agenda.
So-
our
Did they appoint a representative
They
last
did
night?
last year, David Rose was,
But when asked if they had a representative, he's went. He's the chair now, so.
We can reach out to them and
But
Well, they're
perhaps-
going to need to do that at a public meeting. They won't just appoint a representative unless they do it at, and they didn't do one last night. Can we, instead of revamping it for next week, just start as of,
May.
yeah,
Can they do that at their publicized workshop on the 8th?
I think so. Yeah, I think they can. They just need to be together. They won't appoint somebody without the entire board being together.
Okay.
Should we, so we will not have it on the agenda for this time?
Right.
Okay.
No, that's
And
in the
then,
future.
Start in
second,
May.
do we want a report from the Community Events Task Force? Would we like to have that as a regular item on our agenda?
I would like to see that moving forward. I think CROA is going to be over more events in the future, and I think their voice should be.
Would you like to see that starting next week, or wait till May?
I can update it as part of my management report for next week, and then we can just put it underneath
Is that
the
okay?
committee.
Okay. Closure on board meeting agenda and processes. Oh, one last item. This was referenced, Jackson, from something you said earlier. We have resident sign-in, and we have something on our agenda called owner's comment period. And that's owners. But I heard you say something slightly different.
Yeah, I mean,
It could be resident or visitor. What's our sense? Should that just be for owners?
We're an HOA, however, I actually had a conversation with somebody that when she was sharing her comments with me, she turned around and was quick to say, but I'm just a renter. And I said, but you still live here, and I think we still need to hear what you have to say. So it's, Steve, management, your opinion. I mean, we are an HOA, so we're just homeowners.
I'm
but-
going to say, I want to say with members only, however, if the owner
I mean,
has.
owners only?
Yeah, if the owner has given permission for
A
that
proxy.
person to vote in their stead or to speak in their stead, that'd be fine.
That might be the best way.
But
but I'm not sure we would know that when they walk in the door.
Well, you know as far as votes, because they have to send an email, a letter to the town hall authorizing them to vote in their stead.
Are there many in that situation?
No.
Okay.
This is a very gray area.
Can
Because you
I'm
want to
gonna
hear the
suggest-
feedback,
yeah,
but
yeah.
they're
But is
not
there
an
another
official
vehicle?
member.
Is there another vehicle for that?
Here's your problem with the renters, is you have no direct link to the renters. Your link is to the owners.
I understand what our fiduciary is, but I think we've got a broader responsibility. Whether we like it or not, we are functioning in many respects as more than an HOA. And we might want to say that's not right and we don't want to be anything more than an HOA, but we've got other things on this agenda today that clearly move into governmental function. And at the point that we're starting to talk about things that impact people that live here, regardless of their ownership status, I have problems saying you can't be here.
Gary, you want to come up? What was that?
Well,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Kamala. While Gary's coming up,
Sorry.
we had conversations where we said we were going to try to have quick board meetings because we're having all these workshops. Are we now moving into the area where we're going to say we're going to have long board meetings? And how are we going to handle public comments during the meeting or all in advance? I mean, I'm trying to figure out, the reason we said we were going to agree to all these workshops is because we were going to
We wanna
have
be more
quick
efficient.
board meetings. So we're sitting here having a conversation, turning the board meeting into, we'll serve breakfast at midnight. And I just worry about where we're headed here.
Would you be
What we
okay
said the vision
with
was.
with anyone speaking at a workshop, but limiting comments at the actual official board meeting to owners or their designated representatives? Would that work for you?
I'm willing to be flexible. I'm just trying to figure out,
No, I think it's a good point. I don't want a long board meeting. I mean, I do think the point of the workshop is to be able to do what
we're doing.
we're doing, but I also don't want to cut us off from all comment from people that are not officially owners.
We have two separate things going on. We have because that could be happening at a workshop or a board meeting, and then we have making these 1 hour goal of a board meeting going into 2-3 hours. So
Let's make one
two
day.
separate things.
Go ahead, Gary.
Gary Upton, 1471. I understand your concerns. Before you do anything, go back and read the charter. It's very specific about who can vote, how you get a process to vote if you're a renter, like Jack said. And there's implications on what you're talking about based on the words in the charter. I can't quote you, but before you make a decision, go back and read what essentially our Constitution is.
Yeah,
You don't want to get crosswise.
Right. I appreciate that based on my legal background. I'm not trying to be an originalist here, but we can live in the strict language and still allow people that are not owners to make comments. We're not asking them to vote. We're not doing anything other than saying we want to hear from you. And unless we want to put a guard at the door who is checking everyone, which strikes me as an absurd solution,
Right.
then I think the more reasonable solution is how do we manage our time and still hear from people? And I mean, Gary, if you've got something that I'm missing, I've read the charter more than once. I don't think it says we can't hear from people that aren't owners. It just says they can't vote.
I definitely have an opinion on this. So not only charter but state statute says that homeowners have a right to speak, and you have to allow them at least 3 minutes to speak. So that's their right. I can tell you, as a community, you have always allowed non-owners to speak. And if you decide now to cut that off, you become the board that doesn't allow renters or community members to speak. I think that there are some problems with verification or vetting of homeowners or who are homeowners, because we're going to have to set somebody up here with access to our GenArc database. We have to make sure that they're completely paid up on their assessments. That your 3-hour meeting just became a 6-hour meeting for us to get through that process. So I think that complicates things even further. But I think that there is something to be said about 3-minute time frame for people to speak, or some general rule within that time frame, because that meeting is not supposed to be a meeting of debating things throughout the entire community. It's you all are the ones that have to make decisions at that meeting. And I think that the town hall concept and the workshop concepts get you to where you want to go, because it allow you educate your residents to know you want your voice heard, these are your opportunities, and then you have your 3 minutes out of board meeting for your one last chance to convince the board on how they're going to vote.
Right.
And I like what he just said there, because if it kind of ties into what I said. If we're going to do these workshops and things, and it'll allow people to have lots of interaction, which I'm perfectly fine with, then the board meeting needs to be a structured meeting. It's in the evening. People got school kids and stuff like that. It starts at 6. It needs to be over by 8
Yeah.
or something. I mean, an hour is probably too quick, but we need to be disciplined.
And I think there's a way of just putting it on the person who wants to speak by saying, where do you own property? And if they go on property, and if they're a renter and they say, I live at such and such, they have really not answered the question.
Right.
They need to verify that they are the homeowner.
We can ask them, are you an owner or a renter?
No, which is, well, all we need to say is, where do you own property?
The other thing is, some of your owners, homeowners, are actually never living in their homes, and they only rent. And you've got renters that are here year-round
Right.
for years,
Right.
and then they have no voice, which,
But they'd have no voice at the monthly meeting.
at the monthly meeting.
But they have a voice in multiple other places.
Yeah, I mean, right now, we've got a ratio of 7 workshops to 1 board meeting. I mean, there's plenty of opportunity.
Workshops,
I don't
survey,
think we're cutting
surveys.
anybody out of the loop here. I'm okay with what you've just proposed, perfectly okay with it. I agree with Steve. I don't want to be the board that says we don't want to hear from people. We haven't done anything to suggest that so far.
Right.
may have some good
And,
ideas.
and let me just add too, and I want to caution you, do not want to engage in debate with homeowners at a board meeting. That board meeting is your meeting for you all to debate amongst each other, but it's your meeting to take action and to vote.
So one of the structural things, and I hope that this gets reconfigured for the board meeting so that we're not looking this way, but we're more,
It's like a typical, it's going to be kind of tilted on the sides with the podium here.
yeah, so we just have a slightly different arrangement so
Yep.
that we're really conversing with each other on these issues.
Okay.
So for now, it's still called owner's comment period.
Well, and homeowners are going to come up here and they're going to ask you to reply or to answer their questions I asked you in 3 minutes. That could take you the rest of the night.
And there will be issues that have nothing to do with us.
Right.
And that's, I think, as time proceeds, residents, owners in general are going to understand the workshop is a time
Come to
to
this.
vent,
To
if you will, for lack of
dialogue.
a better term, than anything
Okay.
else.
So moving on.
Can I ask one more thing? There may be a possibility, I'll have to talk to Patrick, he may throw something at me here, but why not maybe, I suggested to David that possibly we do some scheduled workshops on the time when we were doing president meetings. So the Wednesdays where I was doing the meeting with the president of the office, why not do like a 9 to 10, 9 to 11? And it doesn't necessarily always have to have a topic. You could say, through social media, send us some questions. And we'll talk about your questions live streamed so that you can hear the responses to it. So if that way, if you can't be here for a daytime meeting, now you can ask us some of those questions.
I brought this up last month, and I got attacked on
And
this
it is
one.
now a good idea.
I don't believe I attacked you on this one.
It sounds so much better when Steve says it.
But I'm gonna go with it.
Okay, so this is a Kevin Kirby idea that I
That's
presented.
all I'm saying. You just let everybody attack you now.
Feeling your pain, bro.
So we'll come to that.
Well, I'm trying to keep your Wednesday night
Yes.
agenda action meetings to just agenda action
I'm going to
items.
make a specific proposal on that when we get to it. Soon.
Oh, sorry, I thought that this was
No,
the
no, no.
part we were talking about that.
Well,
Okay.
brief update, Lexington's plans for events downtown. And so what we wanted to just keep on our radar screen is what do we know about Lexington's plans for falling leaves and now snowing, if anything?
Hopefully something.
Jay, are you leaving on us?
I'm leaving. You guys are in business.
So I guess JR has an update.
I spoke with Mike. They have every intention to do now snowing and fall festival or
Falling leaves.
As long as there's no time constraints put on them as far as they can only have their now snowing set up for 5 days.
It's whatever's in the documents.
And that's up to CCDD.
It's not even us.
Well, not necessarily.
On the
So
permit?
I think what Mike's saying is if Canoa enforces a 5-day restriction on them for now snowing, that they won't be interested in doing the event moving forward.
They need to do it for a longer time.
Now, it is in an easement, perpetual easement agreement that they have. But I will tell you, Disney TCC did now snowing for a 30-day period also. They did not do it for only 5 days. So it has never been enforced. And they do not have an obligation to enforce it, but they can if they choose to.
Let me say one thing and bring it onto a smaller scale. If an owner has had something at their property that's not compliant for 10 years, is it acceptable because they've always gotten away
You
with it?
cannot enforce it against them after a
That is-
certain amount of time frame. Yes, there's a statute of limitations for that. Now, again, the document does not obligate Canoa to enforce it. It gives them the opportunity to if they so see fit, but it does not obligate them
Do you have any reason
to.
to believe Canoa would not grant it, consistent with prior years?
We've never had a application process to grant it. It just always has, since they turned it over to Lexington, it's always been a 30-day plus event. And I think what Mike, I don't want to speak for Mike, but I think from the way I understand the conversation, because it's been a topic of conversation in the event task force, he wants to see if it's going to be enforced or not.
Is CROA money, any CROA money going to these events? In the fall and the now snowing? So why is it an issue with us?
Because if they weren't going to do it at all, were we going to step in and try to help with something?
Is that the only issue?
Yes, that was the only issue, and if they're going to
That was
do
the
it
main
consistent
purpose.
with prior
Okay.
years,
Do we
I
need to
think,
start doing some planning now?
I think that's a wonderful answer.
Yeah, it is.
Well, can we ask Canoa to see if they're going to grant the?
I don't even have it on the agenda to ask them to enforce it. It
Well,
has
I'm
not
just
come up
saying, in
yet.
preparation, if we have to take something over,
Right.
So we
you know,
notice-
rather
Well,
than
here-
30
here-
days prior to finding it out.
Here's where I think it would stem from. As the task force puts together the safety plan, are they going to insist that that be part of the plan? That events don't take place more than 5 days? And I think that's the question. Now, this task force has no governing authority at all over how events are run in town. It's simply suggestions to try and make things better. It's multiple entities in town coming together to come up with ways to make these events better. Does it make sense that that be enforced? I don't know. I think that the problem has always been source of authority. Who can enforce? And when you're looking for some sort of enforcement rights to make sure that the events are run well, then that comes into question. Should that be used or not used? But right now, Canoa hasn't even had that discussion at any of their meetings.
So let them have it. before. I mean, really, we have no right to say anything.
We'll let the task force play out. I mean, again, we're perceiving something that hasn't happened yet. Up to this point, the task force has been brainstorming, throwing things up against the wall just to see what makes the most sense so that we can ensure safe, clean, good traffic flow and plenty of parking for these events.
So with the money we have available for those types of events, we're not going to be funding those
This
apparently,
year.
but we can start looking in, the task force can start looking in, or the community events can start looking into what other events we could,
Other types of
other
things.
things that we can
Founders
do.
Day.
Yeah. At least-
Founder's Day,
Yeah.
things like that.
Well, I would say that goes back to this confusion that Eileen cautioned us against. That would go back to then your committee that you already have established to help with special events, not this task force. This task force is working on cleanliness, safety, traffic, and
Safety.
parking.
Keep the events task force as narrowly focused as possible.
Right.
And come up with a plan that addresses those
This
four
temporary
items.
one.
Yes,
Yeah,
temporary
the
one.
temporary one.
When are we supposed to get a report from the task
I believe
force?
June, they feel like they'll have it all together. My meeting on May 4th, I will have a initial draft, a dirty draft of all the different brainstorming things that we've talked about. And then we can kind of beat that up a little bit, and hopefully June, they'll have a recommendation to bring back to you.
Okay, closer on that for now. Last thing on the updates was Patrick, website RFP process. Thank you, JR. And I think you probably addressed some of this earlier, but inclusion of security protocols for resident-only access. Should we want to go that way when that new website is alive? But I just thought we should have periodic updates on the website process. You were doing RFPs and that was going to close.
Today,
Okay.
5 PM.
Okay.
But I am getting a lot of questions
Good.
coming in from these companies, and I'm answering them. And I'm sitting here right now where I could be answering some more of those, so I think I'm gonna give that on Friday. No, it's not a jab, but I just know that.
That's why we invented
I have
phones.
my part that I have to do and get some of these responses back to them. They were just looking for some answers
Is
to.
there something you need from us something addressed that we need to talk about this time?
At this time, no, I don't.
How many companies did you send it to?
Started off with 8, one jump ship immediately. They deal with larger scale. And I received 2. One is looking to finalize something today. I do have another one that I have to get on a conference call with at some point today. And at the conclusion of, like I said, I think I'm personally going to give them until Friday to just make sure I have everything so I can do compare apples to oranges. But we're getting a lot of response.
Do you have an expectation that you'll get 7 back, barring somebody just decides at the last minute they're just not going to submit a bid? Because you sent out to 8,
Yeah,
right?
I don't think I'll get the full 7.
Okay.
I'm thinking 5.
Are they actually bidding with a price at this point or not at this point?
Well,
Is this conceptual?
No, I'm sorry, they are sending in with prices.
So they're saying, we will do what you're asking for X amount?
Correct.
Okay. So that would become an action item potentially for May, or not that quickly?
For me, yes.
Okay? Perfect.
So, would it be beneficial, I know that some of the board members have expressed some deeper interest in this. Would it be beneficial to assign a board liaison to look at these prior to? Because we have done that with landscaping and some
Like
of
with
our other.
landscaping, Paul and I did that last year, and we went more in depth.
I thought last meeting that we made the decision to have a couple of board liaisons.
Yeah.
For
I would do it
this
the same way
particular
that
item.
anything else is getting done, where we can meet, 3 board members can sit in, and we work with Patrick to go ahead.
But I thought
Well,
I thought it was you
Or
two.
the 2 of us, whatever it is.
And
That's fine.
That's what I would prefer that and then
I'm happy.
that way you all can share back with, it comes a long way to have management plus your
Yeah.
recommendation back to the board to approve this. So we'll officially name David and Kevin then as the liaisons to
That's
help
fine.
review those. when
we
they
actually
come.
did that in the last minute.
Okay, okay.
And so, we haven't reviewed the minutes on that.
Yeah.
We're gonna get the minutes, because I had a lot of.
And so this is a conversation I'll have with Kevin publicly, is do we want to seek board member wish list things of, I'm not saying that well, but what we might want to see on the website. We wanted to be able to do this or have this.
Well, this ties into something, I think we have a survey conversation that was going on.
Yeah, yeah.
It might be able to tie hand in hand with residents to see what residents would like. It sounds like one of the things was to have the live streaming behind the website, things like that.
And we have that
Continue to
from
hear.
residents from about 6 months ago in one of the survey, either 6 or 9 months ago from the survey.
Okay.
So we
then
had
will
comments,
use that.
comments about website and just more in a general way rather than, do you want, which of these 20 functions do you want?
I'd like to
think,
hear everybody.
I think it would be beneficial to have the two of you meet with Patrick and
Okay.
probably JR and I to talk a little bit about the proposal. Once they all come in, we can look at them and then see if there's anything that's missing and talk about how we do that fairly.
Okay.
Because we did send out a certain scope that everybody bid on, so.
And then as we dovetail, just going back to a prior conversation, dovetailing with CDD, just sitting at the meeting last night, several other website ideas for us emerged just from what I was hearing at CDD, which I will share later. Okay, so we'll set up a time. Perfect. Great. Anything else on that? Next big agenda item, athletic fields, recreation area, concession stand updates. Design of the concession stand, final mock-up.
Was there any conversation, I don't really have anything to add to that right now until we meet with the county, but has there been any conversation, when you say a concession stand, who's operating that concession stand?
That's going to be more of an internal conversation on.
Oh, okay.
But I know the leagues are all going to want a piece of operating it during their league time because it's a fundraising opportunity for them.
Okay.
It's a volunteer driven. I mean, every league that I've taken part of with my children has been parents have to volunteer a certain amount of time working the concession stand because the money goes back to the league. Or we can talk about it as a board if CROA wants to staff and maintain a concession stand. Those are the conversations that we'll have to have.
I'm not sure I want to do that, but I do want to put out on the table right now that I would be deeply opposed to a member of CROA or a member of CDD operating a business, running a concession stand either in their own name or under the guise of an organization that they sponsor. I do not want Santa House 2 to occur on this spot. So,
Now, I completely understand, but if the dollars are being raised by Celebration Youth Lacrosse, and the dollars are all going back into Celebration Youth Lacrosse, that's how most concession stands run. Now, there's got to be some minimum standards and some checks and balances because it's happened throughout the United States where youth sports organizations have had money walk away.
And it'll change by team. So if
Yes.
there's a soccer team playing,
Yep.
the soccer moms might go ahead and be
Yep.
doing their volunteer work. It's
Correct.
I think we probably have some kind of facilities use agreement that we're going to sign
Right.
on each of these.
Right, a concession
Charitable
agreement. And
organizations.
there are
You'll-
municipalities,
in there.
I'm sorry, Jack, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but there are municipalities that have concession agreements that we could borrow and tweak and make them our own.
So we don't know if it's going to be hot food?
Well,
It will not be hot
We
food.
don't know about that yet.
Everything's
So,
going to be, except for popcorn and.
Can we
stuff
walk
like that. We're
through,
not cooking.
I know some of this came from the Recreation Task Force 2 years ago. So, 2 points. Can we first walk through the facility? And second, can some of this be tasked to the Recreation Committee? Can
Well, just
some
to-
of these, for example, when we talk about a facilities use agreement and standards, which might mean cleanup and consequences for non-cleanup, et cetera, and then fundings, can some of that be tasked?
Oh, operations can completely be tasked to the Recreation
To the
Committee,
Recreation Committee?
absolutely.
'Cause I think
And
that's
myself
gonna
and
be
the
very
management team,
substantive.
yeah. Well, this is the facade, the outside of the building. This would be, what you're looking at right here, I'll stand up.
Where are we?
We're in the parking lot looking at the building.
So this is the front of the building from the soccer field. So if I'm standing here, this is the athletic field. And turn around and I look, this is the building. So in between the overhang here, this is where the concession stand will be on this side. Will be restroom and storage, and then this will be meeting rooms over here. This is all an overhang. So underneath the overhang, on the concrete slab out front, you'll have some tables and chairs for people to sit and eat
And with inclement weather too.
and it's additional shelter. So I know that there's been some conversation about, do you add the second pavilion? You might not need to because you're going to have a lot of square footage here for some shelter. So this would be the backside, I believe, then.
When I talked with Jeffrey about, I mean, with Danny about that, the reason they designed it that way is to take elements out of some of our CROA buildings in North Village and
Right.
Heritage Hall and stuff like that. They didn't want it to make it look like the CDD building.
Right.
So that's why we got the metal roof and the support pillars and stuff like that.
It matches existing architectural style of our
Of our
buildings and
facilities.
parks, yeah. So this is the floor plan of it. These are the meeting rooms. Well, actually, we'll start here. These are the fields here.
And we've all received these.
Yep.
Yeah, I sent everybody a copy of it.
Yeah.
So these are the fields on this side. This is the overhang with tables and chairs, and then the walkway through here where you can order your concessions on this side. So inside the concession, it just has some counter space to do like hot dog warmer, popcorn maker, ice cream dispenser, snow cone type thing, cotton candy, that kind of stuff. It's not, there's no stoves, there's no hoods, there's no fryers. It's not warm food. Now you could technically take a grill back here and grill up hamburgers and hot dogs and bring them in and sell them packaged. But that's what this concession
It's like they do at the
is
dog
designed for.
park.
Yeah.
Same thing.
So on this side, you have, they're called lockers, they're not lockers. That when we met with the different groups, they said we need a space to store our stuff in, so cones and flags and those types of things. That's what these are. So you have.
So it's really storage.
They're those are chain link separators though.
Yeah, there's like a little fence chain link in there to separate them. And then you have the two restrooms, you have the men's restroom and the women's restroom that are accessed from the soccer field side, athletic field side. And then over
You
on this
asked for
side-
another,
Yeah, I asked for an additional urinal in the men's room. I would have liked to have seen another toilet in the ladies' room, but you have a circle in there that's supposed to be, what, a 70-inch or 90-inch
is that a wheelchair?
wheelchair
The
radius.
turnaround for wheelchairs.
So we couldn't move it, we couldn't make that happen.
Right. And then this side is one big open space that has a divider to divide it into two with closet space on
So
the side.
when you had the meeting with Danny,
Danny and Stevia.
did you change this at all, or did you stay with this one?
Just-
Other than
The only-
urinal?
the only suggestion I had was add another urinal and slide the sinks down to the wall.
Okay.
So that was the only suggestion I had.
On the restroom front, do we feel as though this is an adequate size for the amount of
Yes.
people that would be present? Yeah.
And I don't believe that there is a standard based on
Yeah, it's not-
parks, but they did it, I think, I don't remember exactly, parking spaces maybe, but there was some sort of methodology behind the numbers that would go in there.
So if all three fields are in use, this would be sufficient?
I think
So there's
so.
going to be a total of 4 spots in the men's room and 4 spots.
Well,
I'm sorry, 5, because you have that handicap installed.
So one concern I had was there's lots of doors. Am I reading it correctly?
as to where,
Lots of
Exterior.
access points from the outside.
yes, each locker has their own, each locker room's got its own access door. So you have 4 doors there, you have 2 for the restrooms, you have 1 door that enters the concession stand, and then 2 doors that enter their meeting room.
That might be
So-
fire codes.
Well, no, my question is about access. It's about security of the building. So after hours,
We'll lock it up.
is it all deadbolt lock? Is it key card? How was that?
No, we would not key card this. This would be, especially if you take public dollars, you don't want it to be key card. It would just be a bolt and a lock for the door handle. And then we would put camera system up in
Are
here
you all
also.
signing that? Okay.
Plus, we have the ability to lock up the whole facility at night when we're done, because it's gonna be fenced in. So we can lock.
Oh, so
up
there's a
the
fence around the whole thing?
Around the facility.
So when does this go out for request for proposal?
He's just finalizing some of the, so all these general plans are done, but you have to do another layer of electric plans and another layer of something else. So he's just finalizing those, and then he's starting the permitting process. So probably another month or so before we can get it out in the street for RFP.
And
We've got to
the-
finalize the permitting.
So I saw, if I'm going from memory here, 440, 460, some number like
He
that?
said about 450 is his estimate, but you won't know that until you go to
Until you get the
RFP.
bids.
Then you
And
get an
we
idea.
also asked him, look, is there anything that you could do as an alternate that we could say will save here if we don't do it?
And to be proactive when it comes to the concession stand, just because I have a background with that, I've often come into locations and I've both built locations and come into locations afterwards, and they were not actually ready to be served. Can we go ahead and make sure our drainage is right? We shouldn't need a grease trap, but just let's go ahead and get it in writing that we don't need one. Everything that comes down to licensing that for food, I don't know how that's going to go when it comes to concession. I'm of the understanding it should only be packaged goods. It would not be hot dogs and things like that. So I just want to touch base with somebody so we don't all have an imagination of what that concession stand's going to serve and not be able to.
From a health code standpoint, you're not going to be able to cook hamburgers and hot dogs inside of the concession area because it's not designed for that. You'd have to do a grill outside if you're going to do that.
Even so, that would be.
But yeah, it's not designed to do grease trap or or have a hood for a stove. We just didn't design. It's really a distribution point for concession items.
Just for future conversation, I wouldn't bring up things like hot dogs there. I would just say a concession stand with packaged goods.
Right.
And if we can do more later on, awesome, we'll try. But I don't want to have that perception that we're able to do that and we come back.
So
Pizza at
you mentioned,
It's
you mentioned popcorn and you mentioned something else.
I mean, it's just got counter space there. It's
So,
got,
so my point is, are we providing equipment that then needs to be cleaned, or is it simply you have a counter
it's
space?
just counter space at this point in time. We have not budgeted to buy any of that
Because
concession
I
stuff.
worry about cleaning afterwards.
I see a team coming in, going to Sam's Club, buying a bunch of chips and sodas and whatever, having it there, and they could take it home with them for the
So-
next game that they sell.
No refrigeration.
No, nothing that we're
So there's a place
paying
where
for
you
here.
could have a cooler, you could put in ice, have your sodas there.
Right. Right.
Wait,
This is,
wait, you said no refrigeration.
we did
That's what I
not,
said, no refrigeration.
but this does not have a built-in refrigerator
That's
as
what I'm
part of
asking.
the design. It has the space if we wanted to buy one and put it in there, but that's strictly an operating question. It has nothing to do with the design of the building.
On the electric, it will.
Can I ask a question? What about an ice maker?
Ice is food.
I know, but
Yeah, I could say ice.
people
That's a
know.
food permit.
back here for ice?
would be
where you put the ice maker?
Well, I'm just saying, if you're gonna serve sodas or something like that, you're gonna need some kind of ice to keep them cold.
here, it's got the electrical outlets designed for it. You can put a freezer there, you can put a little ice cream freezer there if you wanted to. I mean, the electrical outlets will be there for
Yeah.
us to do that if we wanted to. But as part of this design though, the bid's not going out for them to put in a freezer and an ice maker and those,
Right.
that would be us
Water
purchasing.
lines and things and proper electric.
But the bid would have water lines and
Yeah.
drainage lines and so forth.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, that's how they're building the
But
building.
these are things that I think the Recreation Committee could grapple with. If we did this, what are the consequences of doing that? What are the permitting process, things after the fact, like with county or state?
Exactly.
health
So I just want to make
officials?
sure we have it right from the get-go.
Yeah.
But the facility
So we're
is-
not increasing funding into it or
Right.
letting the
Right.
residents down.
If you make
The
the
final.
ice machine and the freezer or whatever, you make that part of it, you pay the GC's markup on top of that. So if you buy it after the fact, you're going to
Oh,
get a
yeah,
better
it's just
deal
making
on
sure
it.
that it's set up. You need a drain for the ice
Right.
maker in a certain location, you need a water line coming in
Right.
a certain location. So that's
You
the
plenty of
reason.
power,
Yeah.
appropriate power outlets, GFI and stuff.
Right.
So, yeah.
So when do we're charging the Parks and Recreation Committee to review this, right? And then
Not
when
to
do we
review,
want
not
them?
to review this.
I mean, to what?
This is just going out to RFP.
Well, I think once you get the RFP on the street and then you make your decision to do this, the committee will have 6 to 8 months to put together all the operating procedures for getting this done.
So we're not,
Really,
They're not
having input on
reviewing
the
this.
design.
They
Here's
did,
the
the committee
building.
did 2 years ago in a broad construct.
And actually, and I'm glad you bring that up because when we originally put this out, we have to look back at this entire timeline. To get this started, we finished getting approval for the dog park and we started construction of the dog park. We turned around and asked the board to approve the design, engineering, and then have an owner's rep to design and to oversee the entire process and design this building. That scope was for $1,500. Throughout the time from January 2016 to now, the scope has changed based on feedback from residents or in the athletic groups and boards and committees and everybody else. So what you see here, Danny did for free. He didn't get paid to do the additional work of doubling the design. So I have a change order coming next week for the additional fee that he would have gotten. I asked him last year because he brought it to me in October. And I said, can we wait until we have the conversation about possible future building before we do this? That doesn't seem like that's coming as quickly, so we're going to put this to you now so that he can get paid for this.
Okay, thanks.
I just want to make an observation and a question. When I look at those 2 rooms on the left-hand side of the drawing for meetings, that looks like, to me, it's public use. And if it's public use, when we sit down with the county in a couple of weeks, part of the ball field's proposal is, hey, we've got a building that one of those spaces, two of those spaces there have a public use component to them, don't they?
Let's put it this way, if we have a group that comes to us, whether it's a resident or not a resident, but they say, I want to run a summer camp over the summer, and it's all going to be about soccer, lacrosse training, and then the other half of the day is going to be indoor air conditioning instruction. And I'm going to take residents and I'm going to take non-residents, and I'm going to charge residents less than non-residents. The minute non-residents come in here and sit down in the air conditioning, it is a public purpose building. It has to be ADA accessible, and it would meet the requirements of the county for public purpose.
So we don't have to do anything differently to fall within the public use definition. I want to go back to what Gary was talking about the language of the documents.
No.
It strikes me that we're within the language of that document. Am I missing something, Jack, or is
No,
that?
you have restrooms, it's public use, it's there.
The only difference would be, Jackson, if you were to say, we're going to put a key scanner on every room here, and you cannot get in there unless you're a resident, then it's not public purpose anymore.
Okay, so then we've got the $3.4 million project, which is
Right.
the athletic fields. When do we learn when that kicks off and everything happening there?
Yeah, so the update I gave at the last workshop, I believe, was that all the permitting is being finalized right now, and the biggest permitting issue that we're working through is Reedy Creek, and that's because of wetlands and floodplain. The last response I got back from Hanson Water was that the wetlands, I think, are solved. I think we've got that issue taken care of. One of the questions is the floodplain, because there's two different sets of designs that are sets of documents that show the floodplain amount there. One of them we're okay. It's the original one that we're working off of. The other one we're not. So they're working back and forth to figure out what that looks like. And they understand that it has a huge impact on us if they say you have to go by this new floodplain plan that we weren't aware of. It's going to reduce the size of the field probably. Probably have to take one of the natural fields, reduce it, and move the other fields over. But I don't want to jump to that conclusion yet because we don't know that that's what they're going to say. So we're looking at June for all the permits to be completed, meaning we can break ground probably by the end of June. It's a 6-month project. The reality here, though, is that sod, if it's a cold winter, sod doesn't take very well in cold because it's dormant. You probably can't buy good sod in December if it's cold. Now, if it's an 80-degree December, sod will be wonderful. Bermuda, you can put it down, takes 3 weeks to take, and we'll be ready to go.
So, no one's seen the agenda except for you and David. But board meetings are different than workshops because people will look at the board meeting agendas
Right,
and stuff like
right,
that.
right.
Are you going to say what you just said at the board meeting so everybody hears something consistent?
It's part of my management report, so I can restate this time frame
Yes.
of what it's going to look like for the athletic fields.
And can you do an update about this board's desires about this facility?
Like I said, I think it
No,
would,
not just the fields, not just
well,
what you
no,
just.
I think it would be good to start with, here's the facilities, here's what we're learning about Reedy Creek and some other
Yeah,
stuff.
right.
But then I'd like to say, this is $3.4 million. Okay, we're getting ready to go out for an RFP, here's this. We got the other things, because you're 3.4 plus 450, we're already at 3,850,000, and there's
Right,
other things
right.
gonna happen. So we're looking at a $4 million plus project. I'm fine with that. But let's just say it out loud.
Right.
And then, because that kind of leads to, okay, once we get approvals, then how are we going to manage the process going forward? So that
Right.
there is a clear communication at this board meeting, this is where all these things stand today. Because I think some people will listen to or watch a board meeting that won't pay attention to these workshops.
Right,
But-
exactly,
I mean,
exactly.
Yeah, I'll talk about it during my management report, and then I'll remind everyone that once we break ground, we're going to have a groundbreaking ceremony where we'll get some pictures out there. And then once we actually break ground to start the work, Jack has been appointed by you all at the last workshop to be part of those weekly, bi-weekly meetings. So they'll probably take place every Wednesday. Where we'll go out and talk about what's happening with construction. Did they find buried treasures out there? You know, whatever happens while we're.
You're going to invite me because I'm part of it with that.
Sure, yeah. I mean, as long as the board's okay.
But we do once a month, we do the press reports. So I think in the June David Anderson article, this ought to be what we
Doesn't
talk
have my
about.
name- doesn't have my
Well,
name
but
on it.
you
I'm
know what
putting
I'm
your name
saying,
on
though?
it.
We've sat
Putting your
there,
name on it.
you can put anybody's name on it you want, but this ought to be what we do in the June article. This is really where we're standing
Yeah,
with this
absolutely.
whole process,
Absolutely.
because then people
Yeah.
see it in writing.
So, some related questions. We've given management direction on this. We haven't voted until we actually see RFPs. So we don't need a vote. I raise this as a question. Do we need a vote at this point about anything on this facility?
No, you have paid for this, and you'll be hopefully approving the change order next
Right.
Wednesday for
Right.
the design that you have here now. Danny has been given direction from Jack and I to take this out and do what he has to do through permitting and through RFP process. Once that comes back to you, that's when you'll vote to approve whether or not you want to allocate those dollars to this project.
So once we see the dollar amount, if it comes in at 750, we're going to say, I don't think
Right.
so, or whatever. Or we're
Throw up
gonna-
a little bit in your mouth and then say.
This is all subsequent to meeting with the county May 14th, am I right? The money-
Well, we're still
the
moving
discussion about
forward
the-
with this.
We're moving forward with the
We're
RFP.
moving forward with it.
I think we're moving forward with this project
Yeah.
regardless of what happens with the county.
Well, it can't be regarded, I mean, it's going to happen, but I'm talking about where the funds, are they coming out of that?
Right, right.
Yeah, but I
These
think-
budgets, or are they going to?
I think we, even if the county funds were not available till November 1 of next year, we can fund the thing and then get reimbursed with an understanding that we're getting reimbursed.
We could do
But
that.
their dollars will
I
come
mean,
and
that's
just
what
go
I
into your
always thought
capital
you were gonna
improvement.
do, was seek reimbursement.
So what does this do by doing this with the overall timeline? So we have an RFP, we approve it,
Yeah.
we approve such certain vendor.
Yeah.
What does it do to the overall timeline?
That's a great question. The reality of when the building could start being constructed, it won't happen until all the site work's done. You have to tear out the road, you have to demolish the trees, you have to get everything ready. That probably won't happen. That's the extent, the biggest extent of the work that's going to be done. Once the site work's done and the facility's prepped, the sod and everything else that gets thrown on there doesn't take as long. So you're probably talking October maybe, September,
So
before it's even ready to do that.
My
So
point-
we asked Danny to try and get this in line to where
Okay.
this could open when the facility
That's
opened.
what I'm ending up, that we end up at the same place.
And where did we end up with the lift station conversation?
There was no lift station yet. We did not, I don't believe we added the lift station.
And it's going to be
In the
It
prior,
was not part of what we approved, that
In
last year's
February.
board approved. Now, as you determine what you're gonna do with the other building, you know, as I'm talking, I'm saying to myself, that's not right. We have to have a lift station for this building.
Yeah.
I thought
So
we
that's
discussed
gonna be
it
a
at the
change
last
order.
meeting, and I think we said we had to do a lift, that's what I thought.
It will be a change order that will come to you from Arnco to add the lift station as part of this
to
building.
the original
Yeah.
3-point-some
Right.
million
Right.
field
Right.
construction
I
project.
think before we meet with the county, we need these numbers. We're going to need the costs, we got to be able to go in.
Numbers and timeline?
Well, numbers and timeline, we need to know what the costs are going to be, because we got to go in with some figures. We just can't go in there and,
Well, you've got the.
you know,
We
with
won't have the
estimates.
bids back.
No, we don't have the lift station.
That wasn't
It
that
was
much.
30,000.
We have the numbers on that
It was 30.
30,000?
Yeah, I think
for a
we did.
lift station?
Yeah.
Can we get something from somebody that
Well,
actually lays these figures out in, you know, not exactly, but we need some generality.
think you did. I
Arnco
think
agreed
you-
to the 30,000 to hold that throughout the life, I believe, of their agreement,
So
so,
it's like 90 days or whatever.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he made that comment at the board meeting
Right,
last year.
right.
I guess one question towards Vaughn's point is, do we need RFPs versus a change order? And would a change order make this happen faster and still give us the ability to decide if we want to approve it or not?
Well, I think you enter into a gray area there because you're at $450,000. It probably makes sense to at least submit it out to 3. We asked Danny to do it to all 8 of the construction firms that did the fields. And if you only get one, if Arco's the only one that says, we'll do it, you could vote on that because you sent it out to all of those
Like I
companies.
say, I think we had this conversation.
Yeah, we did. We
And-
did.
And we agreed we had to go for an RFP.
Okay.
So Brian, what's the numbers for
Because we may save 100.
this, for the building, the concession area, the fields, and the lift station. What are we looking at in general? $4 million.
Well, we're
Just
at
under
$3.4 million. If this is $450, we're at $3,850,000. Let's round that to $3,900,000 with a lift station. Depending on what you got to do with permitting and stuff like that, you're somewhere between
About
$4
4.
million and $4,250,000.
Okay.
$4,150,000. I mean, depending on how
Once
much.
we have a general idea when we go in a couple
There's
weeks.
guesses out here
Few
on
weeks.
permitting and other junk, but I mean, that's realistically where we're going to be.
I think this was, you had that total amount in here, didn't you, in your
Yeah,
overview?
I had 500,000 for everything. We're past 500,000 for
I'll
everything.
hurry, I'll get rid of
You
that.
may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one.
That was the famous Brian, this is conservative, and I said, no, Jackson, there isn't anything up here that's conservative.
So, through some of our dialogue prior to this, there's a question about parking and an overview of parking. Do we have sufficient parking for the 3 fields?
There are 55 spaces on site of the athletic fields, and there's additional 88, I believe, along the road, just along the new golf course property
The
that you
road
acquired.
that is not yet built.
Right, and then you have parallel parking on the other side of the road, plus I'm going to recommend a change order for just going ahead and demolishing the site that you own now and doing some Bahia grass there, just to
Is it
flatten
the one we
it.
saw the other day? when we did
The
road
golf
drive
course
around?
property, correct.
Oh,
If
the
you
golf
could-
course, no,
Oh,
not
the
the one we
golf
saw.
course, okay.
The golf course property.
Right, the golf course property. You can put some, if they're going to be back there mobilizing already and tearing everything down, I would recommend that they tear that property down and then just put some Bahia grass there for now, and then that can be used as additional overflow parking.
So that'll be
until you
helpful.
figure out what you're going to do with
In
it.
your presentation, I think that'll be, in your management report, that'll be helpful to say, just to add up those numbers that you've just talked about. Not where the grass is, but the parking spaces, the
Oh,
parallel, what'd you have? The diagonal parking, parallel parking, just add it up.
okay.
Because that sounds like sufficient parking.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think
and
so.
when it comes to cutting that whole area down, I'm not opposed to it at all. I don't know if we do that right away, or if that's our plan in case we say, wait a second, we don't have enough parking, we can do this right away. Just make sure it's cost, it makes sense to do it up
Sure.
front.
Well, the only thing I would say, it's going to be cheaper if you do it while Arnco already has the bulldozers out there,
Yeah.
and the backhoes. But even if you don't use it for overflow parking, you're going to have this beautiful athletic field complex, and they're going to drive by a bunch of brush. So to me, it makes sense just clear it out, clean it up, make
I
it look
agree.
nice,
At
and
least make it look nice.
Yeah.
and-
Can we talk again about this space that was between the dog park and the CDD building? That is CROA property right now?
it is, yes.
And do you know the size of that property, how many acres it is?
2.5 acres, is what he said.
I mean, it's narrow
Yeah.
because is there a ravine behind that?
There's a swale back there as like
Okay.
a dry retention pond.
And then you're back up onto the golf course, right?
Correct, yes.
So that piece of property currently has no specific use, although it was used for debris post-hurricane.
Correct.
I'd like to continue to think about that piece of property as something in our toolkit that we can think about, what do we want to use that for? And certainly, how do we beautify it? Because if we've got all those people driving past our very nice dog park and our very nice library and our not-so-nice CDD building, that we then go to our nice ball fields, but we got this really ugly strip of land there.
Part of that, though, CDD has come to us and asked for us to use a little portion of that to place dumpsters and stuff like that on there, and they would landscape around it. I think Todd has been working on that.
We have, and I haven't brought it, we talked about it during the drive around, but I haven't brought it to you for approval yet, because I got to know whether or not TCC would even allow it. So it just makes more sense to get their approval first, and then if they say yes, it's okay. Now, remember, that is one place when we did the overall conceptual design of the corridor for the sale of the property from TCC, it was going to be a maintenance station area. So we're talking about drastically reducing that, because our maintenance companies, none of them have requested to be on site. They're all operating off site and mobilizing and coming in. But there is an opportunity to take a small footprint of that for some dumpsters for maintenance for CROA and for CDD. We just have to figure out what we want the ask to be from both of them, the maintenance company and CDD, to help offset some costs there. It's not free. I mean, it's not just donating the space.
The passage of a little time.
Yeah.
And that can be part of that larger the goal area, master plan.
The other
Facilities
argument
master plan.
on what you were talking about, Jackson, about clearing that other space where the community center may ultimately go, is even if you have time before you build it, at these ball fields and you have people come from out of town, you're gonna have people who are playing, but you're gonna have little kids. If you know, even if you just got a grassy area where little kids could play, it will be better than having woods where,
It just, yeah, it comes into liabilities and everything else. You gotta, it's definitely something to look at as we continue. Definitely.
Oversight process during construction, I guess you talked about the weekly.
There'll be ongoing meetings with the construction companies, the landscape engineers, we'll have our owner's rep. Our owner's rep really is who we've hired to look out for our best interests. That's Danny Bumpus. He runs those meetings, but I'll be there, Jack will be there. Again, 3 board members can come, you just can't have a quorum.
So there may actually be 2 construction companies, depending on who gets this nod.
It's a possibility. If another company comes in and they can build what we've scoped out and it costs less, and they're a reputable company, you'll have to consider that,
Right.
I think. And everyone that we sent out for bid on the fields were reputable companies.
Right.
But most likely, they're going to say, well, we didn't win the other piece. We don't really want to be involved in this piece.
Any other discussion on this topic? You want to do a break? It's 2:30. You want to do a break or no?
yeah, that would be great.
5 minutes? 10, 5?
5.
We'll come back and do code of conduct, newspaper.
So we're live during the break?
I don't know if there's any way to pause it, is there? Yeah, I think
Good question.
keep going.
Can we run a commercial while we're going?
Let's do a break.
Patrick usually, he comes in and he cuts it and fades it.
So we need to set up a time on the website.
Once we go, let's go through times, because we're doing that today.
Yeah.
For schedules.
Yeah. We can go
Let's do
before
a
after.
majority is
Yeah, let's
best
do-
for, and then
Let's do it before and after.
yeah. There we go.
Move,
I gotta read that one.
30, 34.
All right, you're back live again
we're
now.
live again.
We got
Next
2 hours
item,
worth of stuff to talk about.
finalize the CROA Board Code of Conduct. There was a lot of discussion last time about that. My view is it's getting more and more complicated. I proposed, and I wrote this, that we get simple again, and the simple wording, at least for voting on the Code of Conduct, which we need to have included in our packets that go out tomorrow, so we need to resolve this today, is just be as simple as we can in our language. I propose a single sentence, a new item called communication, and it be worded, communication among board members will be done with transparency and inclusion of all board members. A lot of the specific things we were talking about, like not texting during meetings. Oh, I'm sorry, I moved over that
That was
way.
me today, I had a hard time.
No, but some of that discussion, I think we should just keep talking about, and then when Debbie gets back out of town, just update her on what we've decided. And then we look at these various options, but not get too lost in the details.
I think your suggestion was great. I go along with it.
I think it's fair.
Are we okay with that?
Summarizes.
And then we can close it down, but still have those discussions. Still have a lot of what we've talked about. When I say those discussions, the discussions about transparency and inclusion of all board members, it's, what are you laughing at? We're not live anymore.
No, you are live.
Yes, we are live.
You keep talking.
No, I'm done. I'm just saying, for the
Let me
purpose,
say, for the
Change the
purposes
words.
of reaching a conclusion on this,
for the code of
I
conduct.
will accept a single sentence that you have proposed. I will accept it with all that we've said on the record about what we think proper conduct should be.
Yes.
And that we are people of honor, and we will do our task as we have been asked to do it. I think that we have all made a conscious effort to handle and manage our communications in a way that's appropriate. I reserve the right to reintroduce this problem or to reintroduce this issue
Yes.
if, in my view, or I would think in any member's view, that there is behavior that goes antithetically to this idea of openness. Is that fair?
Intentionally or unintentionally, if somebody.
Yeah, I mean,
That would be fair.
Either way.
And I would add two other things. One is that as new issues arise that we have not discussed or thought about yet, that we raise those and decide how we want to handle that among ourselves. And then second, as I've said earlier today and in prior times, I would like us to look, I'd like to make sure we do this in June, so we're pretty new as a board, functioning board for 2018. Look at how it's going and what do we want to tinker with. I mean, do we still want everyone included on everything? I mean, that becomes a question. Or is it big things? Or I mean, let's just talk about how it's going and what we're doing. So,
yeah, I would hope that we would continue to correspond in the way that we've been doing, where everyone is copied.
Yeah.
We all have a delete button on our electronic devices. We all have the ability to create folders. You know, I think it's within our skill set.
Agreed. Roll forward.
we're okay? We did that one in less than 10 minutes. What are we going to do with that
You
time?
just bought yourself some time.
Do we need to, if we have consensus, any need for a vote? Okay, we're done. We're at closure. We're good?
I will take the sentence that you sent, and then I'll just send it back to you just to make sure that I
Send
didn't
it
miss
back,
it.
make sure it's okay, and then we sign it live next, we
You'll-
actually have to
you'll
vote
approve it
on
on
it at the
Wednesday.
board meeting. Okay, closure? Okay, next topic, newspaper? It's JR. Welcome to the seat of honor.
Why is it plugged in? To give you some background, last year the board asked us to look at the possibility and the feasibility of making the celebration news from a newspaper format to a magazine format. So we started looking for some internal options, some external options, talked to several different publishing houses, looking at options, different alternatives. We did enter into detailed discussions with one company CCMC does use some of its other properties. I've researched them, some other areas that they do everything from community associations to some sports teams to just everything in general. And looking at ways where we can put together a quality product. Last year, the website was discussed. This year, was put in the budget moving forward. And I'm going to give a comparison to the website, and Kevin's heard this already. The website is the front porch of the community. It's the first thing a lot of people see. The reason we looked at going to a magazine format from a newspaper format, it's like you're going to go ahead and renovate the front of the house, but you're not going to put the shrubs in. You're going to open the door, and you're still going to have 20-year-old furniture. The quality, would exceed what we do now. It would be an excellent piece. It'd be an excellent complement to the website and what we're doing here now. I have talked to several advertisers about this. Many were excited about it, particularly the realtors, to be able to do something like this. The magazine would be a full color, full gloss magazine.
You gonna pass any of those out while you're talking?
How often would it be published?
I'm sorry.
How often?
It would still be monthly.
It'll be monthly.
Same schedule?
Same schedule. That's the thing.
Yeah, I can.
These are the other areas with CCMC.
Okay. So if we pass these down, this is a mock that they did based off of one of our newspapers, just to get an idea. This isn't the same quality though of what we would have. Here's what some other communities are doing right now. But we do you have the one
This
that
would be a similar quality
this
to
is
what.
closer to the quality that we're talking about.
JR, how many pages would we need in this magazine to cover what we do in our newspaper right now?
72 pages it would come out to.
So is that,
What's the thickness?
Now, how thick would that be?
This is 23.
Well, put one of these together then.
Let's see.
this one's 86. So this is
86 pages?
86, this is total 86.
So
So it's got a spine
It,
or saddle stitch?
no, it'll be a spine, no saddle stitch, no staples. It'll be a soft touch finish, which is very similar to that. So if it gets wet, the print won't run. There'll be no, fingerprints, anything like that.
You mean, you're talking about rain wet?
Rain wet.
Okay.
Or if you,
Or
Condensation from humidity
condensation.
or
Obviously, if
wet.
you drop it in water, it's a different story.
So is the purpose here economics or presentation or marketing or all of the above kind of?
From a marketing standpoint, in my opinion, I believe it's a better product. It's something, indicative of celebration. Steve can chime in a little bit maybe on the financial standpoint of it, but it's just, it's looking at alternatives out there. We just celebrated the 20th anniversary, now looking at the next 20 years, and, like I said, this is something indicative of the community.
And have you selected a vendor?
We haven't selected anyone. We've been talking to someone that we feel has a good partnership with.
And
right
who is
now.
that?
Print to Order is the name of the
The
company.
people that did this Vistancia?
Yes.
In Las Vegas?
Yes.
And are
That's
they a
from-
subsidiary of CCMC?
Vistancia is,
Vistancia is.
it's one of the communities
I
that
understand, but
CCMC,
Print
it's
to
in
Order is
Arizona.
a subsidiary of CCMC. Does it have any financial relationship to CCMC? Does it have any common ownership with CCMC?
Nothing.
Vistat,
Is it a publicly owned company?
That I'd have to check.
Okay. Do we have any background that we could get on their history and how long they've been and their record?
Like some references and
Yes,
some.
please.
Okay, and in non-CCMC run communities, so you can
Please.
see some other examples.
Please.
So is this economically better, the same, neutral, just nicer packaging? That's all the
That's
question I was trying to ask.
yeah, that's a tough question to answer, and I can't give you either a yes or no. What this does is, as JR has said over and over again, it gives you a higher quality for the newspaper. When they originally approached us, their offer was for us to pick between $1,000 a month guaranteed or 5% for every dollar that they raise. And- Incoming, right. And so what I asked them is, why not both? Give us $1,000 no matter what, because I think that JR's doing right now without a marketing salesperson anywhere between $24,000 to $25,000 a month. So I said, I think you can wake up in the morning without going out and doing any sales and make $25,000. So guarantee us $1,000 a month, and then any dollar you bring in above and beyond $25,000, we want 5% of that. So you guarantee $12,000 a year annual dollars, and then you can make more based on how much advertising sales they do. Now, we don't want it to be a strict advertising magazine. JR is going to have complete control of the editorial content like he does now with the newspaper. So how many ad sales can they do and still allow us to have that editorial content? And I think they came back with around $35,000 a month in sales that they could do without messing up the integrity of the editorial and the feel-good stories that we have in there.
And why do realtors like it better?
Because it's a color piece, it's a flashier piece. I mean, a newspaper is a newspaper. I mean, obviously a photo is going to reproduce a lot better. It's going to show off a lot better. This will have a better shelf life. You read a newspaper once, chances are it's gone in the garbage, or it's in 30 different pieces, and you're just not putting it back together. This may sit on a table longer. This could be something that a visitor picks up and holds on to, rather than skims through it while somebody's shopping and then drops it off, and that's it.
I have one quick question. You mentioned Vistancia. What was the question?
I want to know that it is a completely wholly independent operation. And
They
the reason,
are
part of the
managed-
reason I'm asking the question, just to be candid, is that I recognize that with this move is going to come the need to hire an advertising person.
No.
No.
No? We won't do that at all.
With
They
this
do it all
move, we would contract it out,
We would contract it out to this company, and they would.
and they would manage it all, and
And
we'd
so
bring
we
back
would
some
not
revenue.
have the CCMC override for a staff position that we were talking about if we kept the newspaper. Is
Yeah,
that correct?
if you keep the newspaper in, you have the staffing for the newspaper. If you outsource it, we have that one position that we have not filled.
So
that
we would just get rid of that
And
position.
also,
One other position, too.
Well, and I'd like to not discuss that right now, but what I would say is that there's expenses that go along with maintaining a newspaper. There's printing, there's those types of things, that those expenses would be completely outsourced, and we would get a guaranteed $1,000 a month in revenue. Now, the question that Brian asked, is it better? Not from a dollars and cents standpoint, it's not, because ultimately you bring in revenue for your newspaper. If you eliminate the expenses of a newspaper and just bring in $1,000 a month in revenue, your net expense is probably going to go up a little bit based off of what you're losing in advertising dollars. Because right now you collect them all.
Jackson, to give you comfort, CCMC is required in the contract to disclose to us any place where they would make money off of things. So contractually, they're going to be required to tell us, so you can relax on that one.
Right. And from a standpoint, JR and I have talked about this, and the way we've looked at it is, if it was the JR Steve newspaper and it was the best thing for this community, what would our decision be, or what would our recommendation be? And that's how we've approached this magazine all along. We just feel like the newspaper is a little bit older. I think he has a great analogy by saying, the website is the front porch. What do the publications look like from inside? The newspaper is not broken. I mean, we don't have people beating down our doors saying we hate the newspaper, we want a magazine. But we just got done going through a 20-year anniversary, and the theme of this year's annual meeting was embracing tradition, but toasting the future and moving forward. And print media is dying. It's just not. It's not as relevant as it was. Is it time now to look at a magazine, look at a new format? I think that's the question that we're posing, that we want to bring to you, because we need a decision one way or the other. If we're going to continue doing it the way we've been doing it, we got to hire that position so that we can get it back to where it was before. If we're not, then we'll spend more time exploring this route. But we don't want to, highest and best use of our time, we don't want to spin our wheels if this board's not interested in looking at this.
Couple things that I would like to see, whatever company we go for, to see if maybe an electronic version could be available. Link it to the website, have an electronic version, just like
Electronic goes beyond PDF.
something.
Is that what you
Yeah,
mean?
and we'll look, whatever options we'll explore, but something that could be electronic. Two, I'd like to see with the survey, resident survey on the newspaper. Let's ask. Let's find out, what do people like. I know we've talked about that, but I want to continue.
You got survey results from last year.
As we go into the magazine, I want to continue.
Did
that
we ask, though,
conversation.
the
No.
difference between magazine
We
and
did not.
newspaper? And I think we did that on purpose, because we got to determine the seriousness of the conversation and where that means with
Well,
eliminating
here's-
expenses.
But we could.
Here's where I go with that. And some original residents could help me. I believe we started with a magazine, then we went to a newspaper, I know that other magazines have come over time. When those magazines show up in the mail, there's a magazine called the Home Mag. Yeah, sometimes it's nice to look at, sometimes it just goes straight in the trash. I want to make sure that it's not going in the trash. I want to make sure that our residents have an opt-out. If they don't want to receive it, that we're saving the money on our end. I think that's all. Go for it.
But on that, is there postage?
That everything would, the
All
postage,
expenses.
the printing, everything would be taken care of by the,
That would be print order's problem if someone's throwing away the newspaper, not ours.
Good.
I think, I mean, let's just talk about my wife. You know, my wife will take the newspaper and it will go in the recycling immediately. She'll take 75% of the magazines and they'll go in the recycling immediately. We both end up using our iPad and our computer and going to the website all the time, whether it's Fox News or CBS Sports for me or something like that. If we had most of this money, even if we had the advertising on the website, you will get more and more eye traffic. I mean, if we want to do a magazine, I would question, do we need one once a month or could we do one once a quarter? Do it really, really well, but then put more of the money into a website with links and stuff like that where people would actually go to it and there would be content updates.
And let me take the opposite side, because
Go
my
ahead.
wife would not look at the computer to find any information. And that may be something that you ought to survey the remaining group about, because some people like to have it in hand. It's certainly nice when you go to the hospital or something like that to have something to read.
I'm looking at it as an additional option, not a.
Yeah,
Not a replacement?
the question is, how much would they charge us to do that? It would be a pay-per-view
And that's what
type
I'd like to
thing.
find out in the.
Do we know what percentage of the papers don't get picked up and used?
it varies in the time of the year. When we kind of go into the high
Overall,
season,
just say, in general, say for
we
the.
go from November through March or April, we have nothing left. We'll exhaust our supply before the end of the month. There'll be sometimes in the summer, we may have, 2,000, 1,500 copies left. We print 15,000 a month.
And let me also add that someone said, well, they charge us more for it. They're not charging us anything to do this. They're taking on the responsibility of going out and gathering advertising dollars, and they take on all the expenses that go along with the printing, the publication of the magazine. We get $1,000 guaranteed a month. So if you make this move, you're going from the expenses and running a business to just getting a check every month. Now, he would still have complete editorial control over the paper, though. What goes, or the magazine?
There's no reason not to make the change to a magazine that I can hear.
Other than your negative expense dollars are probably going to go up slightly.
See, two questions. Number one, we produce 15,000 a month right now for the. How many would we get within the magazine?
15,000.
You get 15,000? I thought it was going to be less than that.
No, if we contract with them, we do 15,000, and they'll also handle the mail.
And the reason why we talked about it being less is if we looked at the option if we just did the magazine ourselves in-house, kind of under that same model, and we could not produce the same number of, magazines cost more to produce than a newspaper, so we couldn't produce 15,000 at that same level that we're doing a newspaper without raising the expenses. And then your newspaper, if you were to do it in-house, you're actually going to lose money at a lower level as opposed to outsourcing it and guaranteed $1,000 a month.
One other thing is that you go versus PDF and newspaper or magazine, people who visit here, they like to take that back with them.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
So it will
Just
travel
to
well.
give you some background, they will supply us a digital edition as well.
They will.
Yes,
Okay,
they will.
fantastic. That's,
I love that.
And will a digital edition, if we have an article on Kevin, and we want to do a link to a video footage,
nobody would watch it.
point is, I want to count how many people want.
I see what you're saying.
Is that a feasible?
That's something I'd have to discuss.
Okay,
That's a
so,
Patrick.
so question on advertising. Gary, why don't you come up? Question on advertising. Is that all local advertising, or can there be national?
So they're gonna focus on, they're basically gonna take our list that we use now.
But if they don't fill it or need more funding, can they go national?
We talked, he never mentioned national, they talked about going outside of Celebration regionally here, but we would also have a final say on what they are putting in.
So that was my other question. So if there was something that we deemed inappropriate,
Correct. And that
or
would be part of it.
inappropriate, or, well, I'm thinking more inappropriate for our community.
We want them to reach their $25K a month and then go above and beyond that so that we can get additional revenue dollars. That cost sharing gets better the more they sell.
I think
But again, you would want to have some content control. You don't want them putting in crazy stuff that
Yeah,
shouldn't be.
that's
Well, I was
what
gonna
I'm
say,
going.
I don't want to see real estate for outside of Celebration. I
No,
know
it
it's
would,
crazy.
I mean, it would be our realtor, I mean, we have our realtors.
We see it now, but very
that
small
promote houses
amounts.
outside of Celebration as well, but.
I don't want to see Margaritaville advertising.
Oh, absolutely.
Hour.
What percentage of the newspaper will be advertising?
Of the
The
magazine?
magazine would be advertising.
I believe there'll be at least 38 pages dedicated for us.
Out of 70,
72, it could be 72 or less, depending on how much editorial we have. So when our busier months when we run photo spreads, obviously we'll hit the 72. Some months when a little less is going on, it's usually during the summer, it would back off a little bit.
But they'll take that space and turn it into advertising if we don't
If
fill
we
it
don't
with
fill it,
editorial.
if we tell them we're not gonna fill it, they'll take it for advertising. But
right, Gary?
I didn't want to interrupt, but because that was a good chain of thought, I wanted to mention, I don't think print media is dead. From our spring 2017 survey results, Celebration News
Right.
had the biggest, where do you get your information from in our survey?
Right,
The Celebration website was below that.
Right.
In fact, Celebration News was the first choice along with email,
Right.
Friday Flash.
right.
The website was 5% first choice. So I don't think print media is dead.
Well,
You
yeah,
don't think-
but
you
when
don't
I made
think-
when I made that statement, I'm talking about on a global level.
Yeah,
Print
right,
media
right,
is
right.
dying. But what I would say though is that question does not say the difference between a magazine or a newspaper.
no.
I think
Right,
what that's
right.
saying is that people like to hold something
They
in
like
their
to hold
hand
it.
and
They
read
still
it.
do. But I think your point is complemented.
Oh, yeah, I'm adding to it.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to get rid of print by any means. In fact, I like
So,
it.
I'm
But
still gonna read my book at night.
yeah, I mean, we're going to have one or the other. But
Not on
I
that.
do like this, but I think it also takes up a lot less space.
for it.
You know, when you have it displayed in little. Maybe you can put it out in a few more places in a smaller container rather than a big newspaper.
that's one of the goals we're hoping for. Some of the places in town have actually stopped taking the papers because they're just untidy as they put
Messy.
them.
Just to clarify on the editorial, you will not be getting generic, how to groom your dog articles written by, somebody in, Scottsdale, Arizona.
Tempe.
We have an editor still, and JR will be making sure that what goes in the paper has been proofed and.
So
has
you would
passed.
work with the vendor?
I still do all the writing, all the editings, all the photo submissions. I would work with them on the layout. I mean, they would actually do the graphics, but I would work with them on how we want it laid out.
So
Okay.
instead of
And then
residents.
how much of a percentage of your work, your job, would be, is there any change, does anything happen in your job description and the allocation of your time? Would this make you more available for events? Would it, does it change anything from that standpoint? I'm not sure why you don't want to talk about that right now, but I'd like to know what that impact is.
I don't want to talk about personnel impact right now, but he wouldn't be overseeing a newspaper team anymore. He would be overseeing a contract. So JR would still have submittals coming in from residents. The foundation still would submit their information. It would go to him. He would vet it, make sure it's all proofed, and then he would send it to the company instead of sending it to his staff to do it. So he would be the liaison with the contract.
Finish it.
Okay.
So
I have the feeling that I'm not asking the right questions to get what I want to know.
You're not asking in the
There's-
appropriate time.
No, I think there's,
Read this.
I think there's a couple of things. One is, how much of your time goes to the newspaper now? How much of your time goes to the newspaper now, and how much would go in the future? Does that make your time go up or down?
Probably pretty
It would be
similar,
pretty
right?
similar.
Pretty simple. Okay, then the other
I'm doing
piece,
the same things I've been doing.
Except for I would say though, there's an HR aspect to that.
Okay. I'm not trying to have a discussion in a public forum that's private, but I am trying to understand if it's a wise financial move for us and if there are personnel implications to making the move. Is that fair?
Yes, I think that's absolutely a fair question.
yeah,
But I think what we would recommend then, if you want us to continue pursuing this, any personnel discussion, I would ask you to do it in executive session.
Okay. I'm okay with that. I'm not, I'm not trying to push you out of this, but I'm trying to figure out how we make a decision, because that is a part of the expense.
Yeah, so to me, the larger question, I mean, the question for today is, should management continue pursuing a magazine concept? But also, and I know you did a presentation a year or 6 months ago about this, is what are the financial, I mean, lay it out financially. Is this good for the community? Is it going to end up, but between personnel and then this Arizona or whatever company it might be takes on this or that, takes on the liability?
All right. Well,
Is it kind of a wash? Is it maximum $10,000 either way? I mean,
Yep.
what's the implication financially?
yeah, so real quickly, there is a spreadsheet that's out there, and worked with Jack on it last year that went out to the last CROA board, and there was some back and forth conversation on it. But essentially, it's a little bit confusing because
Right.
all the dollars for newspaper are in one line under CJC called member communication. So what I'm saying to you all today is if you make this move and all you get is $1,000 a month, you have a higher net expense that needs to be offset by revenue somewhere. Whether that's assessments or that's, we bring in more money through recreation programming. The way the budgets are built is you build all your expenses, and then based on what your expenses are, you divide that by the 4,321 homes, minus the revenue. So that line, you would eliminate all expenses that go along with newspaper, except for delivery and storage, right? Delivery and storage would be the only two expenses that we have. But you still have JR's salary, you still have Patrick's salary. You're not bringing in as much revenue as you would if you do the sales yourself. Does that make sense? You're only getting a guaranteed $1,000 a month, as opposed to right now, you're anywhere between $23,000 and $25,000. Now, when we
Expenses go down.
yeah,
Income
but-
goes down,
right,
expenses
all
go
the
down.
expenses go away too, but your total net in that line, it's not going to go down. You're not saving money by doing this. I just want to be perfectly clear. This does not save you money. It actually costs you a little bit more from an overall line because you're not bringing up the revenue. Yeah, and I have that spreadsheet and I can show you what
So
those
the
numbers
improved
look like.
product worth the cost.
Yeah, that's the question. Is it worth the,
Worth the cost?
right?
I think, Jim, did you have
Yeah.
a comment on this?
My only question,
Up here, microphone.
I guess my only question would be, what are you giving away potentially on the upside of advertising dollars? I mean, net looking at that, I mean, like I said before, I mean, this is a pretty attractive area to advertise for any numbers of businesses, I don't care whether it's national or local.
And on the flip side to Jim's statement, though, I've had somebody ask me, well, why would they want, if when we did the numbers to do a magazine in-house, we looked at not being able to produce the same amount of copies because of the expenses that come along with it. So someone asked me, well, why would they want to do it if it's going to cost them that much money too? And the answer is because it's a pretty prominent area in Central Florida. I think if they can say we have Celebration under our belt,
Then they can get,
then they could probably get more. I think that they would like to ultimately have an office here in Orlando doing this for multiple communities around this area.
I've got a question though. Let's look down the road at Island Village, because we have 1,400 more units that are going to be taking up magazine space. Right now we have an excess of 10,000 units we distribute. Is that going to create a necessity for us to have more units to distribute now?
I mean, there is an option for us to renegotiate or to purchase. I mean, I think by the time Island Village comes on, the agreement would probably be towards the end, it would be up for renegotiation.
Yeah, I'm just saying, we use this excess to distribute to the local people that come around and visit Celebration. They take home as part advertising, getting future residents, maybe. I don't know, but, now we've cut out another 1,400 copies that are not available to people.
I think if we, as a board, would like to move forward as a magazine, we need to see, these are all the contract details that we have to figure out. I would like to go ahead, if this is, let's say, I think you mentioned a 3-year as the terms for the contract. If, let's go ahead and say, they don't want us after 3 years, well, I don't want that impact of us always changing our media. So I'd like to make sure that we have an option for renewal.
Right.
And those things are, for increase of copies, are negotiated in the beginning. So let's see if we want to move forward.
Option
with the
to
magazine,
increase number of
and then
copies.
look at the agreements and contracts.
Yeah, and
to get
I'm
that
looking down
finalized.
Celebration Boulevard, Windsor, will they put a newspaper stand, a stand in there for magazines, while the rest of these places take more newspapers off from us too?
Well, I think that
Is
it's
there a
probably,
7-Eleven down there?
if revenue dollars are coming in like we imagine they will with someone that's actually focusing their time on selling, and distribution numbers are getting higher, their dollars are gonna increase based off of that. So
Yeah.
I think that, again, if the board decides that they want us to pursue this further, we can bring the print-to-order representative in, and we can ask some questions of him also, after you all get a chance to review the contract and have those kind of discussions.
When it comes to print to order, did you go to them or they went to you?
I went to them.
Okay. And how many other companies like them are available in this business?
Nobody else would do the same agreement. Everybody else wanted us to take on some sort of responsibility for cost.
So no one else would do the cost sharing, the profit sharing.
So it's really a question, what's, after 3 years, then what? Or if they go belly up in 1 year?
All of these samples that you've given us from print to order are all CCMC communities, as far as I can tell. Is there a standard agreement between CCMC and print to order? Is this the agreement, the same kind of agreement in each of these communities? Are they different agreements? Is there some corporate agreement between the two companies?
Each of the agreements with print to order is by the individual homeowners associations.
I understand that, but CCMC is the management company in every one of these magazines I've looked at for print to order so far. So my question is, does CCMC have an agreement with this company, a standard form or a template or a general understanding about what the arrangement is? You said no other company would do it this way. That strikes me as remarkably odd and wonderful in our case, but I'm curious about why there's just one.
I do not believe so, but I will follow up and
Here's
make
a
sure
further-
that that is not the case,
Here's a
but I do
different
not
way to
believe so.
Ask that question. Where did you receive print to order as a vendor?
I contacted some of my counterparts throughout CCMC, asking them who they use.
Okay.
And this seemed to be the one that everyone felt it worked well with.
Okay.
There were others out there, but they picked up their own printing costs, or they picked up half their printing costs. But this was the one that was willing to work with us, and this is the one that I felt comfortable with.
With those same contacts, are you able to see any of those contracts, or are those completely exclusive to those communities?
I think it would be up to those homeowner associations of whether or not they're willing to share those contracts.
What are our next steps on this?
I will make sure that if there is any type of agreement with CCMC, that there's full disclosure of that. I'll get that information back to you all right away.
That's required in the contract, so let's just get the contract disclosure, and it either is or it isn't.
Right.
And then look at pluses and minuses of going this way. I mean, the plus is the look.
It's definitely a nicer.
The main plus is the look.
And you can link it.
Yeah, absolutely, and the
Your
electronic.
website.
I think
I mean,
the
there's-
biggest
Yeah,
question
I
for
mean,
us is,
I like the idea. I mean, I absolutely like the idea. I like the magazines. I just want to make sure that we're as diligent in finding the best vendor that we can be.
so what we need to do right now then is continue to hold off on filling the open position to just explore this opportunity a little bit further.
Yeah. So there's a like of the look. The sense that we like the look.
Right.
If we can work out the finances and make sure the legal thing is, or the contractual thing is proper.
And one more thing I want everybody to understand, this is a CJC expense, so CROA is 75% of that decision. But historically, what has happened is when we go to Cano and we go to CJC, they say, what does CROA want to do? That's why it's coming to you first, because you drive this conversation. If you don't want to do it, they'll be fine with that. If you push it to them and say, we want to do it, I think that that's something that they'll take into consideration.
And I think further clarity on the budget implications. So there's a little bit of a loss, or less income. What does that really translate to for
Right.
us?
Okay.
Okay, closure. We've dealt with board workshop recording. July 4th parade standards. The parade is scheduled. The question was, there was some email correspondence about that.
So there was an email sent from I think it was the local Democratic Party, that raised what I thought were two distinct problems. One was the lack of signage in the last parade for a sitting U.S. congressman, identifying him as such. And the second distinct problem was the ability to have signs in the parade of some kind, and that was not enforced consistently and going there. I went back in my own archives. I have marched in this parade in its early days as a public candidate for office, and we did in fact in this parade have a banner for a candidate, and there were political signs available during that parade. The concern that I've got personally is that I recognize that an HOA having a parade has the ability to look both like a private event and have the appearance of a public event. I'm not offering a legal opinion, but I am saying that I could not find personally any settled law in the state of Florida that definitively answered that question. And that presents a problem in my mind, because if we are functioning in some ways like a governmental entity, then the First Amendment applies to us, in my personal view. And for us to engage in what's called prior restraint, which is to say you can't have signs unless they say this, or they're this kind, or they're this way, is, I think, problematic at best. On the other hand, if we're a private organization holding a private event, then the First Amendment doesn't apply to private organizations and private events, in my understanding. And so I think we have a fundamental challenge in front of us to decide how we characterize this and what consistency we bring and what we want to do about it. And my proposal is that we ask council for an opinion letter as to those issues.
Of course, the parade does run from, sorry, Jack, the parade does run on county streets and onto private, right? So it does access both.
Yeah.
All right.
Jack?
2 years ago, I was the one who brought this up because this is a community issue, okay? It's an opportunity for us to celebrate the 4th of July, bring the community together. My displeasure was because as the third unit that marched the parade, one of the political groups got in there and they sandwiched in a whole bunch of people that we didn't even know they were coming in with a bunch of candidate signs for outside of our area. They were in fact 3 blocks long is what we had. So
Of different
my
candidates.
feeling was, look, we were honoring Celebration residents. I wanted Celebration residents up front to be honored. I could care less about the political candidates. In fact, I said if we had a horse group marching, they can go behind the horse group, okay, for obvious reasons. I just don't think that we need to divide our community up by some of the rhetoric that I was seeing, okay? I have no problems identifying a political group as we are the so-and-so group or whatever it is, but I don't really want to have campaign slogans or anything like that. I want to have something that would be a unifying thing for the community. So that's where I stand.
I can just remember sometimes during the political groups that were in the parades, and I can recall this, maybe it was 2-3 years ago, that one of the candidates going through and all you heard were boos from the people along the streets. I mean, it got to be kind of divisive out there in a way.
David, from a management standpoint of the parade, it is a community parade, a community event. But we want to be consistent and fair across the board. So the policy, the internal policy, it was not a board voted on policy. It was an internal policy that we put candidates for office towards the back of the parade. And we limit the number of signs or the amount of signs, types of signs that they can have. Now, there was signage that identified the candidate from this event.
Yeah, the email isn't totally correct.
Okay.
The sitting,
Congressman?
yes, was identified and had every right to be identified, as do the 2 main groups in town. The Democrats of Celebration and the United We Stand group were allowed to identify their group. We just didn't want campaign signs, and like Jack had mentioned, on the parade application, you're asked how many people, how many vehicles. Well, the problem was that they had staged over in Lake Evelyn and down the road that we didn't know about. So as
They jumped in.
the group came in, they sent everybody in. And at that point, there's not much anybody can do. And it was lengthy, and there were candidates and individuals that had no affiliation here, and that's where this stemmed from.
And we want to make sure all parties are represented. So if we have a rule, it would be enforced consistently across the board for all parties. But we just want to make sure that that the rules that we have in place are supported by the board. Or if you don't like the rules and you think that we're wrong in the way we're doing this, then we need direction on what you would like to see us do moving forward. But I don't know. We're not saying you can't have political candidates, or you can't have a political aspect. There's always been the Democratic Club of Celebration and the GOP Club of Celebration. They've always, when they're organized and they want to do it, you can put in your application and you can be part of the parade. So that's not our intention. We're just trying to keep it from, if you put it at the front, then someone will say, well, we wanted to be before them, and we're trying to avoid that.
With all due respect, I don't think that the email asked for positioning in the parade. I think the question was that, for example, an incumbent would be identified by signage under the current management policy. A non-incumbent running for the same office, even if they were a Celebration resident, would not be identified with signage. That was the email. Now, is that an incorrect understanding?
Well, I think part of the email does say we were put in the back of the parade and we were not allowed to have our signs. So I think that was part of that conversation.
Yeah, I see that now.
And I think that he's asking, the person that wrote the email is asking for that to change, for there to be allowed to be in different places in there, and then to have the signage that they would like. And this is a big year, because it's a midterm election, and then you're going to have this probably same problem again in 2 years, because it's going to be a presidential election. And the way our country is going, I can imagine it's just going to keep adding more and more of these political type groups that want to be part of it.
Yeah, I just like to focus on our community, okay? I'd rather have our community people honored first, then you can put anybody else in the parade you want.
Question that ties into this, but it doesn't all at the same time. What budget does this come out of? CROA's event budget?
Yes.
Could this rather be a CJC item? And does the CJC fall under any other statutes, which brings up Jackson's concern as far as,
Right.
They're not governmental entities.
when it comes to that item right
Still
there.
private.
So that it's now private, go ahead like you're doing, limited number, whatever the amount of people in, and that specific example of people jumping in behind the parade, putting it maybe in the application that if this happens in the future, you will not be invited back, whether you are whatever, or, because we can't have that happen again. That's just going to start the chaos. And then as far as the signage goes, part of that application, does it include what that signage is? Does it say what it's going to say? Is that something that we need?
And we don't ask them for specifics. We ask them if they'll have vehicles. We ask them if they'll have signage, music, that sort of thing.
But the internal policy that's given out right now says no political signage,
No
right?
political sign. I mean, they're allowed to identify a sitting congressman, senator, commissioner, or anything, but no political signs, to vote for this candidate.
Vote for
No
John
vote,
Doe.
no vote for signs.
See, and it was not always that way. We have Celebration residents running for county office and non-Celebration residents running for county office. Do we treat them separately? Do we say no political signs, which if this were a public parade in a governmental setting, you could not do that, is my understanding, because the First Amendment protects political speech, and it protects prior restraint against that speech. You can't tell me what your sign is going to say before I approve it. The out for an HOA is that we are a private association and it's a private event. The problem is, and the reason I'm asking for a legal opinion on this, is that we are really neither fish nor fowl here. I think it's a really close decision. And candidly, if I'm one of the parties that, and I don't mean political parties, if I'm someone who wants very much to have this signage, this is a really great lawsuit waiting to happen.
I think it makes sense to send our rules over to Tom and get opinion on them. If there's no objections from the board, we can do that.
I think that's wise to do.
That's probably a good call, and just to make sure that we're moving in the right direction.
So-
If Tom comes back though and says, yeah, the way you're doing it is fine, the question comes back to you all: are you okay to back and support us on this? Because we're going to stick to our guns on it and say, no, this is the policy. This is the way that we're asked to implement.
I guess I would say that if Tom's opinion comes back and it's definitive, then maybe there's nothing to discuss and we just say, yeah, that's it, and we back it. Having spent most of my life as a constitutional lawyer, I have deep, deep personal doubts about whether or not this policy is right. I'm not saying I wouldn't vote for it. I certainly am not saying I wouldn't back management, but I would like to know a lot more, and I'd like it discussed in this context.
Okay.
Is that fair? I mean,
I think that's more than fair, absolutely.
Can you
And
send
just
us the policy?
Say what you just said.
Can you send us the
Yeah.
policy?
Yeah, I'll get it and
Yeah,
email
send
it
that
to you
us.
tomorrow.
Yeah, I'd be interested in some of the things that have been brought up as to whether the policy addresses this and whether Tom would address this, and how we distinguish candidates for office, elected officials,
and signage.
main groups, main groups in town. There are two that have been identified. So it's in celebration. Campaign slogans, use of slogans. I mean, and then signage.
Well, I'd also like to address candidates. If you're not a candidate that can't be voted on in celebration, then you shouldn't be appearing in the parade.
Right. If you're, so candidates for office, whether in so if it doesn't include, whether it's our school district or our county or our state, right? You can't,
I assume that's all in your policy, right?
Well, it's, like I said, it's an internal policy, so it's not something that was voted or approved by, so.
But in your
yeah, we
internal policy, does it
Yes,
address
we will
those
have
questions?
everything written down that we will send to Tom and to you all.
and then all those issues are addressed by Tom.
Yeah.
And/or the policy if it's not already. Cool. Closure on that for now?
Thank you for your.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
We're at 3:30. Do we have any discussion on CDD and CJC at this point?
No meeting with CJC.
Nothing yet?
I'll let you know when I officially meet him.
We only have another hour scheduled for the 30.
If I sent to you all how you can do it, so if you want to do it, you have the direction for,
I think we did.
We tried.
no, it's in writing, a request from 2 board members, yeah. So if you guys
did.
want to just do an email to, I haven't seen one, so I apologize if I missed it, but
Double check.
if you just want to send it to me, then.
We drafted.
I apologize, I thought that you all were just going to wait after our meeting that we had to talk about CJC.
No, at this point, it's only a month out now. It's fine.
So I would propose that we, on the strategic plan goals, do something a little different. What I'd hope we would do, which I'll kick down the line so we can get to some of our administrative or management things, is to talk, just to brainstorm on each of those 6 goal areas, just to talk about how we're doing. So what I would love to just not do, what I'd love to do today is to not talk about that, and then just to remind Vaughn and Kevin and Vaughn and Jack for narratives on the goal areas. And then with my apologies for heavy editing on the other versions, I hope those were okay, the heavy edits. I'm trying to, the intent there is so that our website doesn't have 6 bullets, and that's all it has. But to give a spirit, even since we haven't really committed to things, to give a spirit of the types of things we're going to be doing within those goal areas in some pseudo-flowery language that says what we're doing without being fully committal, because we haven't voted on those. Not done that. Does that make sense in terms of what the intent there is? And just a reminder, so that once the goal areas get approved by us as a board at the board meeting, that when they go on the website, there's a little more narrative around it. Does that sound okay? Are you okay not discussing that today? Not discussing? Okay. All right, last item where we have 30 minutes.
Well, you have 2 more items. You added the CDD car wash, and then I have one more thing that I would like.
So no, what did I add?
The CDD car wash that was added, Jack asked to
Oh,
talk about the
the
meeting
car wash.
last night in the car wash and
Yeah,
the CDD.
yeah. Yes, and.
I popped it in here. I didn't know if you wanted it
Okay.
after management or.
So can we finalize a couple of things before we go to the car wash?
That's up to you guys. That's
Is that
fine.
okay? Finalize topics for the May survey. So you've seen the floating things mainly on covenants. I just saw the approval on that from Robert, the current chair. So Does that feel like it's a decent closure? You okay with that?
Yes.
And then I thought inserting that question that we asked a year ago, since it's just 12 months out, it'd be nice for a comparison, just to see how that comes out. And then I would do a quick follow-up that happened today, and that's, do we want to do something on the survey that has to do with the newspaper/magazine piece? Would you like me to work on something real quickly for this May survey? Any desire?
I don't think I don't think that's a pressing need in most
Okay,
people's minds.
okay, so we're closer? Okay, good. Future workshop dates and agendas. Here's a proposal. We've been having a lot of meetings. They've been at irregular times. So a proposal. Every month, this is a statement of fact, every month we have a board meeting on Wednesday night. What if we had a board workshop on a standing time, for example, proposal, first and third Wednesdays in the morning? I go to Jack's comment of last week. You said, don't screw up my afternoons.
That was from Brian, though.
No, I heard. I think that was from your mouth.
No, Brian, we both said it.
Oh, you both did. So just an idea. Make the workshops 2 hours. Put them on the agenda, just a proposal, first and third, knowing that some of us will miss some of them. And then not have it if we feel like we want to withdraw it.
And what time, to what time?
Just 7 to 9 a.m.
I'll mess with my sleep.
Starbucks.
Oh, let me back up the tape. 9 to 11, 10 to
said
12,
that with a straight
9:30
face,
to
didn't
11:30, 9:30 to 12. Mid-morning, just a proposal, just to get us off the dime.
Then we can adjust it later on if we need to, for some
And withdraw it.
some
We
reason.
can't.
We'll withdraw it.
So when do you propose the first one to be?
First week of May, which is,
Second.
that's May 2nd.
At what time?
I don't know, whatever a good start time is.
9 to 11, 10 to 12.
9 to 11, 10 to 12.
9 to 11.
9 to 11?
Say what you just said.
9 to 11.
The first and third Wednesday.
It's either do it at the
Oh,
beginning or the end.
The celebrators meet the first, so do it the second and third Wednesday?
What does that mean? What does that mean?
That means
Well, they meet this whole room, this
Well,
entire,
the problem with second and fourth is
second and third. Do them back to back.
then we have 3 weeks in a row.
Well,
Yes,
what
we are as well.
what about doing a Wednesday and a Monday? So
That's fine.
that way, in case the residents are always tied up on a Wednesday,
That's fine.
Workshop on
whatever, two
a,
different.
or, yeah, we don't have to do Wednesdays.
Yes,
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be Wednesdays.
Why don't we just do
Okay,
once?
it just can't be the first Wednesday of the month.
You want to do Tuesdays?
The only thing with Tuesdays is CCD has their meetings and workshops,
Tuesday evenings, right. Right,
and I would be attending there.
right.
Congratulations.
Mondays? Mondays available?
Mondays?
The point is, booking 2 a month, doing them in the morning, and withdrawing if we don't need them, make them 2 hours.
Let's do them on Mondays from now on.
It's fine.
It doesn't conflict with anything.
So the first Monday and the third Monday of each month from 9 to 11. And
Well,
then,
let's talk about 9 to 11. Okay, let's rethink this.
See, it was from Jack.
You know,
Is that too early or too short?
I'm just saying, you know.
9:30 to 10:30.
Anybody else?
What's the
play
earliest
golf?
that management can get in? I mean,
Well,
you have people traveling.
yeah.
What's realistic?
I think
on
9 o'clock probably makes the most sense because it's not about getting in, it's about getting everything situated and ready to go. And so I think 9 o'clock's probably a good early time.
Rachel, we need you here.
And he's boss. He's boss.
What are you thinking, Jake?
I'm in here at
Are you thinking
7, so I don't care.
9's too early, or
No, whatever you guys do. I'll
What
pick
do you
and-
rec-
I'll
what do
pick
you-
and choose which ones I can't attend.
yeah, there'll be some that
Yeah, we're all gonna.
we each have problems with. Try 9 to 11?
Starting Monday, Monday, April 30th?
That is,
That's not the
that's
first.
that's not in May.
May.
Let's just start May 7th.
May 7th?
Or do you want to do the 30th? What do you want to do?
Oh, sorry, yeah, so, but the 20th is the week of the board week, so, okay, I got what you're saying.
I would start the 30th.
But then have
just
Rachel
because
send
we
out
have
an
so much
invitation for
going
the rest
on.
of the year.
Yes, yeah, we'll just do them all for the.
We get them all on a calendar and we
Otherwise,
know
you
what's,
lose a week.
December
is that
3rd.
what we're doing, first and third Monday?
May 7th.
9:30 to 11:30.
Is that okay?
I think that would be Rachel's opinion then, 9:30, and I'll support her opinion.
9:30.
I will back Rachel's
That sound
opinion
okay?
on that.
So we're saying 9:30 to 11:30 on Monday, the 30th?
No, the 7th.
Oh, not the,
7th and 21st.
Oh,
oh, okay.
so workshops start at 9:30 on the second
7th
Monday.
of May.
On
First
the
and
second
third
Every
Monday.
second Monday?
No, first Monday and third Monday of every month.
First and
The
third.
first and third. Okay.
First and third Monday.
And Rachel is gonna send out invitations for the rest of this year.
You want to do it for 3 or 4 months?
Yes.
And see how that goes.
Okay, well, why don't I do it for the next 3 months? and
Do it for
then
3
you guys
months.
can re-op.
Do it for, yeah, do that for 3 months.
Well, you know,
Go ahead.
the problem is, we're making calendars and doing things
Right.
for a long time in advance. So there's already gonna be conflicts, like,
Right.
I'll be in Mexico while we're doing one of
I
these.
have a
But
con- I have a
so
conflict on the
you have
21st.
conflict too. If we want people to actually try to do it, we need to just get them on calendars
Yeah.
so that they can think about when they travel. So I don't like the 3-month idea.
You want to
Book
just
it
go
for
ahead
the
and do
rest
it?
of the year.
You want to just do it?
And then if we wanna change it,
Does
we
that
can
mean you
change
have
it,
to
but at
do-
least it's there.
Does that mean you have to do 20 different invites?
Just a reoccurring.
Oh, okay,
Just
Put
a
it on my
recurring.
calendar and I invite you.
okay.
And I can just repeat it.
As long as you don't have to do, you can do it for all the dates at once.
And,
Consider it.
and then,
So
if,
just do it for the remainder of the term, right?
and then if there's any big agenda items that come out that need to be discussed for town hall meetings, you could do those in the evenings.
Right, okay, are we okay with that?
No, how about September 17th? You've already got that listed as a board meeting date. You gonna do a workshop that morning?
No, we can eliminate those as we get, I think if we don't need them.
That's what I'm going through.
We can
right now.
hold it, and if we don't need it, as we get close to that, we can just take those
September
off.
17th.
Yeah, we changed the board meeting for September to the 17th.
Oh, that's right.
So we might want to, let's look at that. Well, the first,
So,
so we do, maybe do the 1st and the 4th of that month.
All right, how about December 17th too?
So look at some individual months like
those
September.
are the
will.
two, I think.
How about this? We will not book a workshop on board meeting days. If they
Perfect.
fall on any board meeting days, we
Just,
won't
just
book it.
shift it a week. Just shift it. At that point, we may not need workshops.
You just won't let that go, will you? You just have to have two.
David, I just won't book it, and as we get
Don't book
closer to that time frame, if you need to add one, we'll add one.
Okay, we'll add, okay, that's fine.
Or you could
Go.
It's going to help during budget season to have these meetings on the calendar.
Okay.
That's a good point.
So just
Then we'll do more.
looking at topics for workshops. One that was from our discussion of last week was Mattamy. Should we invite them for May 7th?
Give him both dates and see if he can get back to us in a reasonable time, so that way we could make the agenda for the earlier one if he can.
So try Island Village for May 7th if we can. I will be out on the 21st. Debbie should be back, Debbie will be back in what, 2 weeks?
Do we have any problem putting in Mattamy on the agenda every workshop for a report or an update? Do we want to keep
not
in
on
touch
every
with them?
I wouldn't put them on every workship. Would we want them at every?
Every
Can we
board-
talk about that
every
at the workshop with them here and ask them?
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Raise that when they're here.
okay.
Let's hope that they can come on May 7th. What, would you like to have 2 topics? Should we try to shift the workshops to 2 topics rather than multiple topics?
Sure.
We've had a lot that we've covered. What is your pleasure?
We tend to always talk 20 minutes for a 10-minute topic, so I think we should be realistic about setting time frames.
Right, so
And
book
give
it
we shouldn't do one item. If we're gonna meet for 2 hours, let's have 4 or 5 items, but then let's give legitimate time to them and then actually try to get them done.
Okay?
Can I offer a suggestion? Can we now take the strategic plan that you're about to approve and start assigning dates to those different items?
Yes.
We
For
can take
workshops,
this,
you mean?
the 6 different areas and just start popping them on those workshop item calendars.
That'd be good.
So that way you can
do
start talking about them and getting updates on each item.
You
I
want
think as
that?
soon as we start putting out forest fires, it'll be great.
Yeah, see, we have several other things that were issues. Comcast was an issue, downtown was an issue, CROA replacement reserves is an issue.
What was our conversation about Comcast?
I think
Wasn't it
it
about
stems
the,
from the,
Mirasol and?
yeah, I think it stems from
Condos in
the
general.
emails that we got and the discussion about
That's right.
what our role and what CROA's role is with Comcast. And
We need to knock some of these
So it should say
things out.
Comcast in condo associations, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
it's
the
the
concern.
condo, it's not about Comcast,
Right.
it's about the condo association.
Right.
So let's try to get that
So do we-
early in May.
You want to try that?
Yeah, because at that point, it'll be a month since that's been brought up to us and we haven't
So
discussed
let's
it.
try that also, and I agree with your point.
And I think,
Brian?
I think once we've met with the county, we're going to need a workshop date, allocated at least half of a workshop to talk about whatever the feedback is.
How about May 21st then for that?
And I will be out. I will definitely not be around for that time.
We'll miss you.
I don't know. Me too.
Okay.
When do you want to talk about, do we want to try CROA replacement reserves at the same time on May 7th, or no?
I won't be here on the 7th.
That's going to
We
be,
need you.
we need you.
Can you refresh my memory on what we're doing with that? Do you want to update on the reserve study?
No.
No, I think it's just finalized how we feel about it.
Okay, I got
Use
you.
of-
Yeah.
It won't be a long topic item. I think it'll be 15 minutes. That's the thing I sent the email on, so.
But they're protected.
But you probably do want me here.
Yes.
You probably do it right now.
Do we want to schedule that for the, again, I'm not here the 21st. Do you want to do that?
21st is fine.
Okay.
I can do it. And I think 15 minutes will be fine.
And just to knock it out, just a question. Do we want to have some more discussion about downtown? I think we've seen Tom's review of that. Do we want to try that also on May 7th? Is that too much? Island Village, Comcast, and downtown.
Downtown as far as what?
Where we stand.
What's our role in things that are happening downtown and
Are you talking about
not the events piece?
We have a whole series of emails that deal with CCDD too. So it's almost, we've had them from, I'm drawing a blank on his name. But we've had 2 or 3.
Gary?
Not Gary, no, CCDD.
Gary Moyer?
The architect, what's his name?
Oh,
Jeffrey.
Jeffrey,
No,
not Jeffrey,
I'm drawing.
Mark Nicotunis,
Pardon?
from Mark, you mean?
Mark.
No, not Mark.
Was it Floyd?
Floyd.
Oh, Floyd, who is on the board, but is
Yeah.
Sounds like 2 words.
And we've had 1 or 2 from him. I mean, you could do town center and CCDD together type things, even if you.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Not together, but other entities, if that's the topic.
Why don't we try that and see how that plays out for now? Let's halt on that and deal just for a few minutes. You had 2 other things. One was the car wash stuff.
I think Jack asked to add that
Okay.
added to the agenda.
I was just going to reiterate what they mentioned last night. You know, it was the thought that the car wash took place at the Bohemian, and some people had said that they used CDD water. It was not CDD water, it was recycled water from the Bohemian. It was not sanctioned by the Bohemian, or it actually wasn't sanctioned by the car wash event person, nor was it actually approved to have a car wash by the CDD. CDD basically told the people that addressed them last night that, you know, it's a matter of who wants to enforce this ordinance. And he said, it probably belongs to code enforcement. But better yet, the thing to do, if you really want to solve the problem, is get together, work it out, and come up with a solution in advance prior to this occurring.
With that, what did they say? And I'm sorry I wasn't there. What did they say? Because I know that we got copied on this email a month ago. So they
Right.
did try ahead of time. Is that, what was their response with that?
The CDD, they said that all they did was approve the event. They didn't approve a car wash. Okay?
They approved the exotic car show.
Now, the ordinance you're talking about, it goes to code enforcement. Now, I think in the email, she mentioned that she tried contacting code enforcement. If code enforcement doesn't want to pursue it, then it's not going to be pursued, because the sheriff's department doesn't want to get involved at all.
Well, I can add to this. I had a 40-minute conversation with Laurel this morning. What I always look at in these types of situations is what is the source of authority. There's nothing in the CROA documents that I know of that says you can't car wash. It's not a CROA property anyways. It's not one of your common areas. It's not one of your members' areas. So then I look at Kanoa's documents. And in Kanoa documents, I don't see anything that says there cannot be a car wash. Nothing that enforces that. Now, there are things that will talk about making sure you're not breaking laws and those types of things. So we look at the county then. The code is what has been violated for the county code, and that's the discharge of water through the storm drains. So from an enforcement standpoint, the county really has the enforcement issue here, and it is documented with them. I mean, Laurel contacted them while it was happening and has pictures and sent it to them. So I'd be interested to see what the county does. How important is that code to the county, and how much are they going to enforce it? From a Kanoa standpoint, I will say that the Kanoa businesses cannot operate additional businesses outside of what they were approved for without TCC approval. So we will remind the water tower shops, and we'll remind the hotel from a Kanoa standpoint that you can't do that, that you can't operate a business. Now, the argument can be made it's not a business, it was a charity. And you have to begin with the end in mind here. If you enforce that all the way to the highest level, what's most likely going to happen? If it's a once-a-year charity that they're doing car washes, and the county's not doing anything to enforce the code, is it worth Kanoa's time to spend dollars fighting that at that level? Not saying that they would or wouldn't. I'm just throwing that out there, that you have to look through the source of authority. We come back to the same problem here of what the Special Events Committee is going exploring. How do the different governing entities work in town to ensure that the events are being held at the highest quality possible from a safety, a cleanliness, a parking, and a traffic standpoint? And how can that be addressed to where there's collaboration and people working together? And hopefully we can come to an outcome from that. But I don't know that there's anything you can do about the car wash. And I don't think it's even really about the car wash. I think the car wash is the symbolism for what we're trying to accomplish here.
Let me just want to add one thing. There is an exception. Individual residents can do their own car washing and not worry about the stormwater.
Well, there's 4,321 homes here, not counting the condos. My question to that code is, well, what happens to the water that they're using? I mean, not all car wash water is contained, but there's a good point that if it's a commercial car wash, there are rules on how they're supposed to do that.
Yeah.
In multiple cars, but drive around town on a Saturday, not our town necessarily, but outside of Celebration, and there's kids holding car wash signs up all over the place, and they're happening in parking lots of Publixes and 7-Elevens and those types of things. So I just don't know how strict that code is, or what type of enforcement is being done on it.
I think at the end of the day, the bigger conversation, the one that we've got scheduled now in the workshop, is talking about how we function with downtown. This is it's already in 6 weeks come up over and over and over again. This time it was the car wash, but I think you're right, it's about much more than that.
Yeah.
And I think that ultimately, we're going to have to make some decisions as a board as to whether or not we want to perpetuate the standard of, it's not us. I mean, last night at CCD, I think I heard CROA mentioned 8-10 times. I mean, it was just, I thought I was at a CROA meeting because we were talking so much about CROA. And I suspect they'll look at this video and go, yeah, all they did was talk about CDD at the CROA meeting. Okay, we did. So at some point, we have to get some unanimity about what we're going to do and how we're going to proceed. And if the other entities in town won't take the lead, if CJC won't do it, if Kanoa won't do it, if CCD won't do it, then we have to decide if we're the ones that step forward.
But how do we step forward if we have no power? I mean, in all honesty, that was a great talk, but I mean,
Maybe
if
not.
we have zero leverage.
We have
this
input.
situation, maybe not this situation that I'm talking about, but this is, on the grand scheme of it, we need to take ownership. If a resident comes to us and we are their voice, we need to walk them to who it is and hold everybody accountable. That's it.
I can
But
add.
in
I
the
can,
email responses to the emails that were sent, it was told who to go to.
Oh,
and they
yeah.
even came from
And that's
Gary
why I'm
and places
saying-
like that.
Let's not go to this specific situation, but we are getting tons of these, and they're not going to end anytime soon. So are we going to be the board that continues to turn around and say, sorry, you gotta go here, you gotta go there, you gotta go here, you gotta go there, while you sit and watch the community fall apart?
I think it's a great
I know
topic
it's-
for a workshop
it's
to continue to talk
far-fetched,
about. I think
but-
it's a legitimate question. We don't have hard power, Brian. We clearly don't. So then the question is, do we acknowledge that and say, as a result, we have no leverage? I don't think anyone's saying we have no leverage, but there's somewhere in between those two positions. And I think we got to figure out as a board where we want to fall on that.
And prioritize our time and our energies.
One of your soft powers, though, as the leadership in this community, is to continue to promote collaboration and working together. And then it's no different than any other relationship, whether that's a friendship, a marriage, or a board relationship. If we're going to speak collaboration, we have to not only talk the talk, we have to walk the walk. And I think
But when
that's
we do
important.
this as a workshop topic, we might want to have it be the only topic then, because
It's a big topic.
in some ways it's motherhood and apple pie, but it could be a full-time job for a board member.
But the solution here, though, isn't going to be company A, you cannot run your event that way, because we don't have the authority to, there's no enforcement authority to do that at all. But the solution can be, listen, we really want to focus on the highest and best events in celebration through collaboration, through getting these different entities together, and they're not there yet. And I've said it last year, you cannot get a task force to be effective if CDD's not there and if Lexington's not there. They held the biggest events in town, so without them sitting at the table, we're not going to accomplish what we want to accomplish. But we're saying it, though, and we're doing it, and we're moving it forward the best we can. And I think that we continue to do that and talk about collaboration. Hopefully, eventually, everybody comes on board to
And
that.
model collaboration.
Right. And maybe make some decisions moving forward that will get the people at the table to make sure that these things are getting taken care of.
I would like to see, as community events, on the community events committee, I'd like to see CCD formally asked to have someone back on that committee. They aren't, they're not there, and also,
We aren't going to get to
At
that.
least want to talk about minutes.
also Lexington.
Yeah.
It matters.
Yeah.
Because the two of the main parties on this are not there. And it's very hard, it's very difficult to sit in that meeting and discuss things that we really don't have the answers to because the two of the main players aren't there.
And it's not about politics or hurting people's feelings. It's about getting the results that we're looking for. And if we can get there, I think we can accomplish that. But we've got a long way to go to get there.
So just to bring us back around, I know you have one more thing.
One more thing.
Hold on that for a moment. Minutes of workshops. So I had put that as an administrative item. When I saw the board agenda, the minutes for workshops and our organizational meeting are listed on our agenda, with the exception of the minutes from last week's workshop. One of my suggestions back to management was that we see the minutes as soon as they're ready, rather than in the board packet.
Yeah,
So you'll see that. And so the minutes are coming.
okay, but I,
Yeah.
because I have a problem if we don't have minutes.
Right.
And if we do have them, I'd like to see them quickly. You can label them draft, but I mean, we had 2 or 3 things in here where people were trying to remember, what did we say? And if we had
Right.
those draft minutes, we could have referred to them.
Right.
And we ought to, if they're going to come forward and the board's going to approve them, we ought to at least be able to have seen them in a draft.
And review
been
them.
allowed to comment.
And comment, yeah. So is that something?
And you will see minutes tomorrow as part of that board packet, but you're saying you want to see them sooner than later.
Yeah, see them
Then
before
you
the
don't-
board-
You don't want to see them at the end of the month when
Yeah.
you're approving, or when you're doing
No.
the board meeting. You want to see
I
them.
assume, maybe it's Rachel, maybe it's somebody else, somebody's doing the minutes and building them the next day or two.
I'm doing them. The problem is, I think it's getting adjusted to the great many meetings. And whereas I had a month to get minutes, depending on how frequently you want to see these, if you go through a channel.
Well, when you do minutes, as an example, for a meeting like this, do you do 4 pages of paragraphs, or do you do a series of bullets?
The
Because
board meetings would typically be 4 or 5 pages of minutes.
from these types of
From
workshops,
a board meeting, from the workshop, it's just basically notes only, informal notes.
Unless you guys are voting
But
on something.
There
and
were
then-
no minutes posted on the website for workshops last year.
Yeah, we did, because we actually did notes, we didn't actually. do
So you did-
minutes.
you
But I
just-
understand that
so
you-
now-
I
but we're-
understand board meetings, but when I think of a workshop, I mean, I could live with 1 or 1.5 pages of bullets, but under this topic, they said,
And that's historic.
Brian's gonna do this, Kevin's gonna do this.
Yeah, what
boom,
are
boom.
the decision,
And, you
what
know,
are the decision points?
And I could live with bullet style, quick and
Yeah.
And
easy.
that's historically how they've been done, but for some reason I thought.
Okay, well, I guess I'm asking the
Well,
rest of the board for
not-
workshops, can you be comfortable with something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, not being posted on the website doesn't mean that there's not notes from the workshop. It's just a matter of you all want to see them before the next workshop so that you
See
can have
them
some
soon-
understanding.
soon-
Well,
sooner
and
rather
it's
than
not
later.
about capturing the debate and every word that you said,
No,
every word that
no,
Jack
it's
said.
really the
It's
decision.
about
Not like
what
the
the
C-
decision was.
Not like the CDD minutes.
Right. I
Not at
understand
all
completely.
like the CDD minutes.
Okay.
So you want to see some bullet point notes from your workshop, and then when it comes to a board meeting, you will have a more formal.
It's more.
I'm perfectly comfortable with what you just said, detail for the board, and then just some bullets, one pager of bullets, you know, and really almost from a workshop, this is what was decided, or it's this person's responsibility to do this, so that we can say, we got it, and then quicker and better to the group, and then somebody can say, well, we forgot one item, or something.
So for the next workshop, I
So-
would bring in the prior workshop bullet points.
We can probably email them too if they're
Yeah,
done
email ahead.
soon enough. We can just email them. Can I just add one more thing to that, David? If there's, we've only had one item, I think, that was actually, that you took action on, that you all voted on something. Most of it's consensus. I get a bunch of nodding heads
Yeah,
and I
that's
move
fine.
forward. If there's an action item, it needs to be treated like a board meeting action item on those minutes.
And do those have to then go forward to the board meeting?
It needs to be approved at your board meeting then if you took action.
So there are a couple of those. Are those reflected in our action items here?
Your action item would be to approve the minutes of the workshops, or to approve the
Does
the
that
workshop.
vary it too much for our residents? Just a question.
Everything's out there. I mean,
Okay.
these,
Okay.
It's on page 393.
And I know we
No,
have a executive session prior to our board meeting
yes,
next.
we need to, it's not going to be able to do it on the 24th. I can't get the attorneys there. So they're asking about the 27th,
Oh, so it's not going to be,
27th of,
April. I will do this in an email
okay,
to everybody though,
can't be
but the 24th is not going to work.
Okay.
So-
24th
And
or
it doesn't look like
25th.
the 27th will either, so we'll have to try and find some additional dates to do
Okay.
it.
And then there's one last thing you said you had.
Yes,
You said you had two things.
Just this one last thing, and then that's it. Yesterday afternoon, Pat called David. She was going to come today to talk to you all in person, but she had a root canal today, and she's not able to make it. So I'll let David let you know what his conversation was with Pat yesterday.
Pat called on a conference call to me and said that she is retiring. Pat Watson is retiring effective October 1st. And Steve was on the call and Tim Cook,
Joe Cook.
Joe Cook, pardon me. So Joe will be taking Pat's place. Pat and I had a nice conversation, knowing that that was bittersweet for her. And there's an article coming out in the Celebration News on May 1st that talks about her history with Celebration and a lot of her achievements. And she wanted to make that announcement to you directly. And so
Unfortunately, I think the root canal wasn't as simple as she probably thought it was going
I
to be at
said she can
first.
show up and we would give her time, and I respected her wanting to tell you directly. And
But she did text me and ask me if we could just go ahead and share this with the board. And I think it's also important, as David mentioned, Joe Cook, who is the Eastern Division President, will be our liaison here at Celebration.
Are we going to deal with this in any way at the board meeting?
and say
At
what
the
you just,
board meeting, are we going to mention this any,
that's a good question.
we should deal with it some way, at least.
We can, yeah, we can certainly do that next week at the board meeting.
Is he a local
Why don't you put it in your mail?
resident?
Who, Joe? Joe lives in Seminole County,
Seminole, okay.
Oh,
so he's about 40 minutes away. And I know that he's trying to establish an office in Central Florida, Orlando, Winter Park, somewhere in this area that we have our Eastern Division office for CCMC.
anything else for the good of the order?
And you're going to get back to us with a date on the executive session, right?
Yeah.
We'll do an email grouping, because I got to get Susanna involved and the attorneys and try and figure out a
Thank
date that
you all
everybody can meet.
for good engagement, and we're only 6 minutes over. Call the meeting over? We're done, thank you.
Through May 11th? Yeah. It seems like this is a time of year where